Good morning to everyone who's joined us from around the world, and good afternoon, perhaps in some places around the world that you've joined us. Welcome to the Century in GL Education, the African Future Learning Summit. We'll be starting in just a couple of minutes, where we're going to have Emma Wade-Smith, OBE, doing the opening address. It's wonderful to have so many of you here. We have over 500 of you signed up to come and attend from 50 countries around the world, including 20 different countries in Africa. So please, in the chat feature, which so many of you already have started, please put a little welcome. Make sure you're typing to panelists and attendees. Tell us who you are, where you work, and where you're from. It's great to have so many countries. We can see Egypt, Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria. I've seen the UK and USA already, and then we've got UAE there as well. So please keep putting that in. It's great to see so many different countries here. And so a little bit about myself. So my name is Tom Thacker. I'm here just to host the first half of today. I am the head of schools at Century. I'm a former math teacher as well. And I'm really excited about today because actually, in fact, I used to live in Africa. I spent 2 years living in Uganda. So I saw someone post there from Uganda. It's great to have them here. I spent 2 years teaching at Rainbow International School. So any of you who know Rainbow, an incredible school, and Kampala is an incredible place as well. And I really, really enjoyed that. Throughout today, we've got a great selection of speakers. I'll be hosting this morning. I'll be handing over to Rachel Rogers from GL later this morning to talk through the second half of the day. And you'll notice at the bottom of every slide, we've got today's companies that are talking, their Twitter profiles, so @ThisIsCentury and @GLEducation, and our hashtag for today. So please be tweeting, be posting on LinkedIn using hashtag AFLS21. It'd be great to see lots of tweets, and I'm sure Century and GL will be retweeting tweets from throughout the day. So here you can see our program. So in about 30 seconds or so, I'll be handing over to Emma Wade-Smith, OBE, Her Majesty's Trade Commissioner for Africa from the Department for International Trade. For the opening address after that, we'll have Priya, Lakhani, OBE, the CEO and founder of Century, doing her keynote. And then we've got a great panel session led by Charles Wood, our International Director at Century. We'll then have a short break. And then we've got another set of sessions. We've got Amanda Clarke, International Director of GL, another panel session moderated by Veer, and it'll be a closing address by Dr. Adam England, the Principal of CIS Lagos. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Emma Wade-Smith, OBE, for her opening address. Emma, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tom, and well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world joining us for this amazing event. It's absolutely wonderful to be invited to open and say a few remarks at the top of today's activities. And really to explore the future of education together and the future of learning in Africa at what I consider to be possibly the most crucial time of our generation to fix the problems that we've encountered over many years and to find the solutions together. Now, Tom said I'm Her Majesty's Trade Commissioner for Africa, and in this role, it is my job and my duty and indeed my passion to increase the value and the volume of trade and investment between Africa and the UK, and education is absolutely at the heart of our work across 21 different African countries. It's at the heart of what we do because it is absolutely fundamental to economic development, to economic transformation, to inclusion, to sustainability. And it's also at the heart because the UK is a powerhouse of education capability, expertise, experience, and technology. So it is clear to all of us just how vulnerable education systems are, and with many countries all around the world, including here in Africa, battling with the fallout of the global pandemic, security threats, technological barriers, regulatory barriers in some cases. And as always, it is the learners, the youth of Africa, and indeed the adults of Africa who suffer the consequences of this. So there's a real imperative, I think, now more than ever, for governments all across the world, and including here in Africa, and indeed the entire educational community, to unite together in partnership to really build back better, to ensure that our education systems, our capabilities, our capacities are more robust and resilient than ever before. Part of this is about ensuring that we leave no one behind. Our focus is very heavily on children, but when I mean leave no one behind, it's also about how we help adults transition, how we help with lifelong learning, technical and vocational skills, as well as primary school and secondary school education. And I think what I love about the way that the UK engages in education is that we really combine our efforts around unique and innovative solutions. And I think, however insurmountable the challenges may feel, when we bring our best minds together in events like this one today, then we really do have that potential to create the solutions that will transform our societies. Now, of course, Africa is changing rapidly, both economically, technologically, demographically. This is a very dynamic and vibrant continent. We have forecasts around economic growth, with 5 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world over the next few years being located right here on the African continent. And of course, with economic growth and demographic growth, we're predicting that in just the next 3 decades, 1 in 4 global consumers will be an African. That's mind-blowing numbers, and makes it even more important as we seek to create the jobs that Africa's youth and Africa's adults aspire to, that education really is at the forefront of all of this. And so breaking down barriers, I think, is key to delivering Africa's education agenda. I mean, we have seen the fragility of education systems all over the world when faced with the extraordinary circumstances of lockdowns and restrictions. At the start of the pandemic, around this time last year, there were estimates of some 250 million young Africans being out of school because of those lockdown restrictions, and without widespread access to distance education or remote or online tech education, many were essentially deprived of any learning opportunities. And where we see in Africa infrastructure barriers, technology barriers, it really is essential to see how we can bring together our education providers with our telecoms providers and our energy solution providers to really address access to education in a meaningful, sustainable way. And that means that students of all communities, girls, boys, men, women, urban dwellers, rural dwellers, of all educational capabilities, that we provide equal access to opportunities in education. And really breaking down the barriers to learning as well. So supporting teachers with the latest pedagogies and methodologies so that learners learn in the best way and learn the skills that we need for the future that we are going to be living in. And so this is about developing knowledge, it's about understanding, it's about creating 21st century skills so that we can build and create more success, more talent, achieve more potential in both work and life for Africa's many, many people. I think there's also a thing about breaking down barriers to partnership as well. So thinking about intra-African trade and knowledge sharing really as the key to the sustainable development of Africa and the way that we educate our people. And it's through forums such as this one today that we can bring African educators together and develop that common language around the challenges as well as the opportunities for this continent, as well as thinking about how do we How do we understand best practice? How do we share those ideas? How do we scale those? And what are indeed the models for success? And the UK is absolutely committed to working closer with Africa's governments, Africa's education providers, Africa's teachers, and really making sure that we address some of those barriers that are constraining our ability to work together across Africa and between Africa and the UK. So the work of the Department for International Trade, which I represent here in Africa, my team of trade and investment advisors across 21 African countries, are really here to understand the education landscape, the legal environment, the key priorities, and the areas where we can identify that UK expertise and capability can really help to make a difference. We have connected African governments and businesses and investors with a whole host of UK education providers in areas including university, transnational education, English language training, TVET reform, and all importantly, ed tech. And the UK is a growing exporter to and investor in the African continent. And we show time and time again how British businesses really do have what it takes to deliver at scale and with real impact in a way that supports long-term sustainable growth in Africa. Back in the UK, our teams have been really busy over the last year or so rethinking our international education strategy and reviewing the progress that we have made. We have an international education champion who's been having some lively conversations with people all across Africa, really helping to build some of those relationships with policymakers, with educational leaders, perhaps some of you here on this event today. And we've also been holding consultations on how the UK's world-renowned teacher training offer can be offered outside of the UK so that we can bring that trusted international qualification for teachers to the market. And we know, of course, good teaching means good learning. And of course, our network of British international schools, or indeed schools that deliver a UK curriculum, continues to grow across Africa, offering high quality schooling experience and equipping students with international qualifications that enable them to connect to this world of opportunity, including sometimes studying in the UK itself. Girls' education remains a particular priority for the UK government, and that is why we're really pleased that we are partnering with Kenya for the Global Education Summit in just a few weeks' time. And that seeks to raise billions of pounds to support the cause of girls' education and ultimately get 40 million more girls into schools worldwide. Now, all of this requires strong coordination and collaboration between governments and private sectors, and all of those involved in education, united behind a shared goal to support access to and the quality and relevance of education for each and every person. And that's why I'm so thrilled to see this partnership that brings together the well-established and highly engaged UK organisations of GL Education and Century Tech in partnership with CIS Lagos in a discussion around learning of the future. Too often we find ourselves focused on the present and we're not able to find the time to think about and plan for an exciting but uncertain future. And I think a future that will present even more challenges along with the hope of future prosperity. So I think today this is about thinking about the future, being future focused and future thinking. So exploring how technology and innovation can provide solutions to the problems we've been trying to address for many years. Exploring how these can help us overcome some of the entrenched divides which we find across Africa because of the scale and diversity of this extraordinary continent. Exploring how technology and innovation can really break down geographical barriers, technological barriers, economic barriers, and explore together how technology-enabled, data-informed education can really unlock Africa's education system and support teaching to deliver educational excellence and support learners to attain high results. So simply put, this is about future-proofing Africa's education system to provide better educational outcomes, more skilled graduates, and more young people and older people too, who can really build and develop a digital economy that can support the continent's economic growth through to the fourth industrial revolution. Finally, then, just to say, the UK government is absolutely committed to this agenda of education and education in Africa. We work across the Department for International Trade, across the British Council, across the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, really to work out how we can best support the shift that Africa requires in terms of its education, that Africa wants, that we hear from Africa's educators, from Africa's governments, that we want to make together to make a lasting difference for the future generations. And my team, some of whom are joining this event today, are going to be listening hard to the trends and the opportunities that we hear about to better connect opportunities with providers. And so I encourage you to get in touch with us. We have a dedicated point of contact for anyone who's interested in commercial opportunities in the education or indeed any other space between the UK and Africa. We have a single email address, that is dit.africa@fcdo.gov.uk. And let me finish then by just offering my congratulations to all of those involved in putting together today's event. And I wish everybody an excellent, insightful and inspiring conference experience. Thank you very much indeed.
Great, thank you, Emma. That was one incredible opening to our day. Really, really enjoyed that. Some really fascinating things you were saying, and I'm sure people will get in touch. And Emma, can I ask you to put that email address you said in the chat? I think lots of people already started messaging saying, can we have the email address? I couldn't get it down, it was so quick. Yeah, you can type it in the chat, everyone can have it. So Emma, thank you very much, that was incredible. So a little bit about housekeeping before I hand over to Priya Lakhani. So it's great to have hundreds of you here already this morning and enjoying it so far. And if you are enjoying it, please remember to keep tweeting about it. The hashtag and the companies to tag are at the bottom. And of course, please share this event with friends and colleagues. If you're enjoying it so far, they can still join. We're going to be here for a few more hours, so people can still join throughout the morning our time. It is great to see so many countries here. Let me try and rattle off a few of the countries we've got so far. I've seen China, UAE, Ghana, Tanzania, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Qatar, Uganda, the UK, Egypt, USA, Turkey, and Malawi. I'm sure there's lots more that I've missed as well. Keep putting where you're from. It's great to see such a range of countries throughout Africa and throughout the world here with us this morning. If you have any questions, remember you have got that Q&A box to use. So please keep putting it in there and we can put our questions to the panelists as we have time. Lots of you have asking about certificates. There will be certificates of attendance, which will be emailed to you. As you've registered for this Zoom, we have your email address. We will send through certificates to you. So don't worry, they'll come through to you in the next couple of days. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Priya Lakhani, OBE, for the role of artificial intelligence in African education. Priya, over to you.
Thanks so much, Tom. I'm so excited to welcome you all to the African Future Learning Summit. This incredible interest in this event shows how vital the question of the future of education across the world is. As Tom said, we are delighted to be welcoming so many attendees from dozens of countries. That's attendees right across Africa, from Egypt, South Africa, Senegal to Somalia. The length and breadth of the continent is represented here today. But we're also honoured to be welcoming hundreds of guests from around the world too. I know we've got many people from Europe, from North America, South America and beyond too. So it's really encouraging to hear how interested people are in the future of education in Africa. And looking at this chat, I love how you're all chatting and saying hello. So from the Middle East, I can see we've got people, Assalamu alaikum, Ramadan Mubarak to all of you. To my fellow Kenyans, Jambo, Habari, and Nigeria, how far, Koyo, and hello, I see we've got someone from Watford as well. So do keep chatting, do ask questions, and keep engaging with us. We absolutely love to see your messages on the chat. I'm also really honoured to be speaking alongside our distinguished roster of speakers here today. A huge, huge thank you to Emma Wade-Smith, Her Majesty's Trade Commissioner for Africa, for opening this amazing event. And also a big thank you to our speakers from Crawford International School, Kenya, CIS Lagos, Curo, the British International School of Cairo, GL Education, our partners, Amana Elementary School, Malvern College, Egypt, and Braeburn Schools in Kenya. So why are we here today to discuss the future of education in Africa? This is actually something that is incredibly close to my heart, and it's linked to why I started Century in the first place. I used to spend my term time in leafy Cheshire in the north of England, but my summers and winters were spent in Nairobi, where my grandparents lived, and my family, my father's from Nairobi and my mum is from Kampala. So we're an East African Indian family. I remember being around 6 years old. I was dressed in this white dress. I didn't like wearing dresses at that age, but my parents put me in a smart Sunday dress. We stopped along the road in Nairobi and we ensured that we had some makai. I'm sure there's lots of you who are enjoying that in Nairobi. I really miss it. Sugarcane on the street. And my brother and I, while waiting for my parents to pick up our fresh hot makai, for those of you who don't know what that is, it's fresh hot corn on the cob. It's absolutely incredible. You get it on the side of the street in Nairobi. And we were playing with some of the children. And when we were playing with some of the children, I noticed, and I often noticed, that they didn't have shoes on. They often were wearing very unclean clothes. And I felt incredibly privileged. As many of you know, in that sort of environment, families like ours, we would have a driver, Jeroge. We had a white Mercedes that he would drive us around in. I was dressed very well. You know, we were stopping on the side of the street to get a snack, but these children didn't know if they were getting clean water in the next few days. And that it was really mortifying for me. I was very young. It was an assault on all the senses, if you like, for a young child. And that was when I decided I really wanted to try and change the world, as naive as that might sound. But I know that I'm speaking to many people in education. So I think you're probably the same. You want to change the world in some way. We all want to sort of put our stamp on the world and see if we can help in some way. But at the tender age of 6, I decided this is what I wanted to do. And I grew up thinking, well, the areas in which I need to have an impact will clearly be nutrition, to ensure that we can help feed people so that they're not hungry and they're not begging on the street, healthcare to ensure that they're safe, that they can live, and education. How can we actually take them away from that poverty cycle? We need to provide an education. I then went through school as again, naive as you might think this is, thinking equity and justice around the world. What does that mean? I must become a lawyer. And I decided that I wanted to be a barrister, which is what I did. I practiced for a few years, realized I wasn't quite having the impact I wanted on the world. And so I quit my job in 2008 and I started Masala. And if you're from England, you might have seen it in the bigger supermarkets. But for every pot of sauce that we sold at Masala, it was my chance to change the world. And I decided to feed a homeless person a hot meal, provide the pentavalent 5-in-1 vaccine. We did 35,000 of those across Africa, and build schools. So after millions of meals, tens of thousands of vaccines and some schools, it was going pretty well. But I also learned by sitting on a government advisory board in England that there are such problems in education that really need to be solved. Here I was funding schools in parts of the world where I thought they desperately really needed those schools, but we were replicating a British model because I was often doing this in Commonwealth countries. The problems in school still existed, and these were the one-size-fits-all delivery of education and also teacher workload. We know how important formative assessment is, for example, ensuring we understand what children do and don't understand so we can make timely targeted interventions, but that actually poses a huge, immense strain on our teachers, and we need to try and solve those problems. So rather than giving a man a fish, the old adage, which is what I was doing with Masala, I decided actually to set something up where we could teach the man how to fish. And so that really was where Century was born. How can we start to utilize technology as a tool to augment teaching and learning, to solve the one-size-fits-all, and to empower our teachers so that we can make those interventions and we can essentially reduce their workload. And the idea was to do this, to make it global, to scale up, and very close to my heart, as always has been, is how can we get this technology into Africa? Now, this takes us to 2021. And we're here to talk about the future. So what exactly does the future of education in Africa look like? Let me first offer you a few statistics. Africa's population will double by 2050. If it continues to go at its current rates, this means that 2.5 billion people will be in Africa, meaning 1 in 4 of the world's population will be African. And by the year 2100 or 2100, 1 in 3 people on Earth will be African. Sub-Saharan Africa's population is growing at 2.7% a year, which is more than twice as fast as South Asia and Latin America. This means Africa is adding the population of France every 2 years. In most African countries, at least 70% of the population is under the age of 30, This means great potential for Africa, but also great risks. If properly harnessed, the boom in young people could see the continent surge to new levels of prosperity. But without proper innovation and care, it could instead lead to increasing poverty, unemployment, and unrest. However, even today, education remains out of reach for so many Africans. UNESCO data shows that sub-Saharan Africa has the highest rates of education exclusion in the world. Over 1/5 of primary school aged children are out of school, while 1/3 of secondary school aged children are also out of school. It gets worse as they get older, with almost 60% of children between the ages of 15 and 17 not in school, the time that many of us would consider the most crucial in terms of gaining qualifications. On top of this, in the past year, COVID-19 has left 250 million children in primary and secondary schools in Africa out of school. It's disrupted learning for so many students and has particularly damaged the education of children in areas with little access to technology or the internet, which of course will disproportionately affect African children. Finally, teachers are the single most important factor in the delivery of a good education. But the UN says that Africa needs to train 17 million more teachers to meet the increased demand in the next decade alone. So this means that education is perhaps the single most important consideration for Africa in the coming decades. You might think, actually, isn't healthcare more important? And in the immediate future, the answer is yes. But you cannot build an effective healthcare system without first educating people. So I actually think that education is even more important because everything else in society depends upon it. So if education is so crucial to the success of Africa, what is being done to ensure that African children receive an education that allows them to flourish? Countries across the world, as well as bodies like the UN, are funding development in Africa to the tune of billions per year. The UK alone sends around £3 billion in aid to Africa every year, with much of it designed to improve education, healthcare, and basic infrastructure. But there are more fundamental issues that need to be resolved before Africa as a whole is able to embrace a modern 21st century education. In sub-Saharan Africa, only 1 in 10 learners have access to a computer at home. 2 in 10 have access to the internet. In rural areas, reliant on subsistence agriculture, children are regularly absent from school when crops needed to be harvested, and children living in conflict zones face unimaginable difficulties with their education. But innovation in the world of education is advancing at a rapid pace, and many recent innovations will make it easier for these young people in Africa to be connected to education. I've spoken to many ministers of education in Africa who are determined to help their children to receive a high quality education wherever they are. For example, in 2019, Rwanda launched its first ever satellite, which was designed to connect remote schools in the country to the internet. I know that Emma will be really delighted that it was a British company, OneWeb, that made this happen for Rwanda. But there are many other examples of innovations that are helping to bridge the digital divide in Africa. This year, for example, I know that Elon Musk's satellite service, Starlink, plans to launch in Africa. It will hopefully soon provide an affordable way for unconnected learners to connect to high-speed internet. However, we're still some way off the goal of connecting every learner with an education, digital or otherwise. The World Bank says that $100 billion will be needed to achieve universal access to broadband connectivity in Africa by 2030. So serious challenges remain. But having said that, there are pockets of innovation in schools across the country, and the attendees and guests that are here today are testament to the fact that the will, the passion and the dedication exists to ensure that all children in Africa are able to access a high quality education. I'm really delighted that my team at Century, you've seen Tom here today. I know that many of you know Charles very well. They are playing an important role in helping African learners to thrive. Take CIS Lagos, for example. You're going to hear more from them later in the day, and I really recommend you stick around to listen to them. But I wanted to mention their outstanding digital learning provision briefly. This year alone, CIS Lagos students have answered 500,000 questions on completed 50,000 nuggets. Those are what we call micro lessons at Century Tech on the platform. And most importantly, the platform's artificial intelligence technology has automatically remedied over 10,000 misconceptions in learners' knowledge. Dr. Adam England, who's the principal of CIS Lagos, who will be speaking later, as I said, has been the pioneer behind that school's deployment of Century's AI technology in the classroom. And he has demonstrated how it can enable a more transformative change to how we approach teaching, which I think is going to be really crucial in unlocking the potential of education in Africa. And I'm really looking forward to hearing his speech later. There are schools across the continent, just like CIS Lagos, that represent the African pioneers of education technology. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Rogers' adoption curve, the curve where you have your innovators and your pioneers, then your early adopters, your late adopters, and then what we like to affectionately call the laggards. But if we think about that adoption curve in terms of how technology is adopted and embedded and how that grows through a particular country, a territory, an ecosystem, it's CIS Lagos and others. They are the pioneers and the innovators. They took the technology on when it was first available, and they are now providing the evidence and proof points to those early and late majority, that the people who want to adopt technology only once they know that it works. They're demonstrating the technology really can and does make a difference. So ensure that you and your schools are part of that wave, but you don't come on too late. Those schools are leading the charge in Africa. They're a model to follow and a testament to the innovation and ingenuity that exists across the continent. But how exactly can this sort of technology that they're pioneering help their students and teachers to thrive? Well, at Century, for example, we work with them and we harness the power of artificial intelligence to provide each learner with an education that is tailored to their individual needs. It uses advanced technology to serve a very simple purpose: improve the way children learn and make the teacher and student relationship more powerful. So how exactly does AI do this, and why is it different from other technology? Well, legacy technology, old technology, if you think about digital technology, you log in. It might, for example, collect your page views, the scores that a student gets, but that's pretty much it. Every single student is on the same journey. With Century's AI, it tracks every single movement. It learns your learning behaviors. If a student's struggling in physics, the machine will automatically identify it's because they can't calculate equations in maths. So imagine a machine that can truly personalize the learning journey in a digitized way for every student. It then collects vast amounts of data, analyzes the data, and then provides that data to teachers instantly. So teachers can see from no marking and no assessing, but exactly where timely targeted interventions are available and where they're necessary for their students. Technologies like Century are the today of African learning. Fundamentally, the future of African learning is the same as the future of learning across the planet. At its core, learning is a human process. No technology will ever replace teachers. And technology for technology's sake isn't the answer. Throughout history and in every corner of the earth, schools are based on human-to-human interaction. They are based on teachers understanding the needs of their students and helping them to flourish as developing people. We can complement and augment this by using advanced learning technologies, but the core role of humans in learning will never change. The future of African learning will involve technology, and that is for sure. But schools of the future should harness the powers of technologies like AI and not depend upon them. While AI can liberate teachers and personalise education, it can't assess the nuances in long-form writing yet, let alone comfort an upset student or nurture a young mind to its full potential or inspire a child to achieve greatness. These all require the care of a human teacher. But technology does present a huge opportunity to African schools, and parts of African leapfrog others using today's technology. You don't have to think about removing legacy old technology, failed technologies, which plague schools in Europe and America. You can take the new technologies, leapfrog those, start using them, ride on the wave of mobile technology and cloud technology, use AI from today with very few barriers along the way. So there's a vital role for technology to play in solving the problems that I've outlined. And the problems alone, the problems facing African education won't be solved by technology alone. The biggest need that we have is the dire need for more teachers. And perhaps one day we will see digitized teacher training on an AI platform being scaled up so we can achieve some of those goals. And so there's clearly a role for technology to play to help solving all these problems. But again, it's an aid and it's a tool. And we've got to think bigger about how to solve these huge problems facing Africa, not just Africa, but other countries across the world. So we cannot be complacent. The guarantee of inertia is worse than the potential failure, because you learn and adapt from failure. So to conclude my talk, I've put it to you that we have a choice. We can choose to continue to do little about the problems facing African education and continue to let down generations of children while not supporting the many innovative and forward-thinking schools that exist across the continent. Or we can choose to help Africa to build better systems. This technology exists today. The humans obviously exist, and you're going to hear from a group of them today on the several panels and the closing keynote speech. We simply need to scale up what the people in this audience today have proven to work. Passionate teachers combined with high quality technology delivered in a way that is accessible for children, no matter what their background or circumstances. Please do get in touch with us. You can contact me. I'm on LinkedIn. Ask questions today. We'd love to get in touch with you to see how we can work with you. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Priya. Another inspiring speech. Really enjoyed it. I think one of the key things that I really got from what you were talking about, Priya, was about pioneers. Actually, I'm sure a lot of people sitting here thinking, who are the pioneers? If you are here today listening to this and engaging with this, you are amongst the pioneers. You are a pioneer in your country, wherever you are around the world. We've got more and more countries coming on. You are one of the people who can help lead the change in education wherever you are, in Africa or around the world. We're actually now going to hear from some more pioneers in our panel session. So I'm going to hand over to Charles Wood, our International Director from Century, and he's going to introduce our panelists and lead the session. Charles, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you, Priya. I was just going to say, for a Wednesday morning, this is one of the most inspiring Wednesdays I've ever had. I feel alive with energy after hearing such great speakers talk about the future of Africa and education. A very good morning to everyone who has joined this panel session. My name is Charles Wood. I lead the international team at Century Tech, which, as you've heard, is a teaching and learning tool driven by artificial intelligence. And it's a real pleasure today to introduce you to this next session and our first panel session of the day, which is harnessing adaptive technology to future-proof our learners. This is such an important topic for so many reasons, but I think two things that stand out. Firstly, adaptive technologies such as artificial intelligence have proven to be transformative across most sectors in society. Seeking out efficiencies and aiming for more effective outcomes, does AI have a place in our school systems and classrooms? Secondly, the rise and prevalence of adaptive technologies means that our young people are being exposed to such technologies from a very young age. As educators, do we have a duty to prepare young people for a job market that will look very different as a result of AI and automation? Well, rather than giving you my views, which working for a technology company would of course be biased, we have a fantastic panel of educators from across Africa who are going to explore this important topic with me today. We have Jonathan Davies, Assistant Head of Junior School at British International School, Cairo in Egypt. As well as his leadership role as Assistant Head, Jonathan is also the online safety coordinator for the school and a year 1 to 6 teacher by practice. And Jonathan has a strong passion for technology and how it can be used effectively in education. A very good morning to you, Jonathan.
Good morning, Charles.
Wonderful. Secondly, we have Abimbola Dosunmu, Assistant Head of Junior School at Children's International School, Lagos in Nigeria. After 20 years of professional experience in education, Abimbola has masterminded improved learning at several schools through curriculum development, qualitative leadership, and strategic change management. At CIS Lagos, Abimbola leads strategic management and operational excellence at the school. Also, as the founder of Educators Roundtable, a platform to raise champions in the educational sector, Abimbola also finds time to run online coaching and mentoring for teachers. A very good morning to you, Abimbola.
Good morning, Mr. Charles. Good morning.
Great. And thirdly, we have Angela Scherer, Digital Transformation Manager at Cura Holdings, South Africa. Originally trained as a teacher, Angela has worked in the educational and technology field for 20 years, including a role at Microsoft South Africa for 11 years. Angela's extensive experience in facilitating professional development programs for teachers on the integration of technology has meant working with ministries of education and schools across a range of African countries. At Cura Holdings, Angela is responsible for supporting the integration of technology for the 180 schools in the group and is passionate about empowering people to bring about positive change. Good morning, Angela. Good to see you.
Morning, Charles. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon.
Yes, indeed. Afternoon for those of you who are on that time zone. And finally, we have Felix Malombe, tech integration specialist at Crawford International School in Kenya. As both a Microsoft Innovative Educator Expert and Google Certified Education Trainer, Felix has a very active role in various networks across his school in Kenya. Felix is also Executive Director at STEAM Labs Africa, an organization that seeks to mainstream STEAM and computer science teaching throughout Africa and beyond, with the goal of leveling the playing field of innovation. As a 2019 NATE Curriculum Developer Gold winner, Felix keynotes on the international stage about his STEAM Lab curriculum, which is guided by the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And this is currently being used in schools across Kenya. A very good morning to you, Felix.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you very much for this.
Wonderful. Well, it's so good to have you all here. And I'm sure the audience are excited to hear your views on this really important topic. And it's fantastic that we have representatives from across Africa, both the North, the South, the East, and the West. Before we get started, just for those of you who are tuning in today, the panelists are also able to answer some of your questions. So please do pose any questions or comments that occur out of this conversation. You can use the Q&A box or the chat function, and we'll try to save some time towards the end of the session where we can answer your questions directly. So brilliant. Well, we're going to go around the panelists, and we're going to start with an important question just to give some context to this discussion. And Felix, maybe we can start with you and we'll go in reverse order. As an open question, as a school in Kenya or as a group in Angela's case, where are you in your journey of exploring what the role of adaptive technology is within education or within a school ecosystem?
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity, Mr. Charles. In terms of use of adaptive technology, first of all, I recently learned from Century Tech website where my students are working on various assessments at Crawford International School. I learned that the statement that I read that the brain, everyone is able to learn. The brain is able to learn in the same capacity for everyone. It just, the difference is the learning methods. So how you learn and how you keep content, that is what matters. And it's the first thing that comes when you log into Century Tech. And that is a powerful message to our students. And so we see adaptive technology as that which provides personalized learning assistance for different kinds of learners and, you know, different availing different ways in which they can learn. And so at Crawford International School, where I am I am at a technology integration specialist. My job involves finding those strategies that are going to meet the needs of our students, because as we know, and from what we are saying, is that students learn differently and at different levels, at different times in terms of speed, and so it is leveraging on that. We are in using various tools for this, including Century Tech. We are currently at Microsoft Showcase School, having implemented the digital transformation framework from Microsoft that focuses on 4 areas: visioning for the school leadership, to the place of the student privacy, and also to the student modern learning, and even the teachers teaching. So use of the various platforms so that we can reach every student at their own level. Of course, and other things that we have also incorporated at the Crawford International School. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, it sounds like it's very focused on that personalization and differentiation elements. And I mean, that's looking at a school context. Angela, you're coming to this discussion from looking at a group context with 180 schools under your management. What does that look like in terms of your journey in adaptive technology, and where are you as a group?
Thanks, Charles. Yeah, I think, the goal of any good teacher is to provide an adaptive or a personalized learning opportunity for students. whether technology is involved or not. And I think really the role of technology is it just makes that opportunity a little bit easier for the teacher to administer. So I think for many years, our teachers in all of our schools have been using, tools to enable adaptive technology, whether it's just little quizzes, drawings, some data that they can use to try and adapt learning. But obviously, our ultimate goal is to really consider a full adaptive learning platform where we can pull all of those different pieces together. So we've basically been looking for solutions for a number of years and trying to find one that is holistic. So not just sort of rule-based, but really encompasses all of these important pieces, which I think we'll talk about as we go along. And so we have recently started piloting Sentry technology as of last year, so that we can really kind of pull in the power of the technology, and as Priya started mentioning, the power of the AI to inform that truly personalized learning opportunity for all of our students.
Brilliant. Well, that's great to hear. And I think what I heard there is that using technology as our servant, or as something that's augmented with the human element of teaching, which of course is so important. So thank you for that. Ambola, welcome and good morning. CIS Lagos, as Priya alluded to, is sort of leading the charge in terms of innovation. Where are you as a school in terms of your use of adaptive technology?
Okay, thank you very much. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I'm not sure where you're joining from, but you're welcome. At our school, and presently, I must say that, yes, differentiation is going on, personalized learning is going on, but more than ever, I would say that we have this continuous growth pathway for empowering our teachers so that they can also improve their instructions. And this adaptive technology has also helped our teachers. While we're using Century Tech, we're also using Swivel, because at the end of the day, we just don't want to have best practices. We also want to have best thinking practices that will be suitable and effective for all our students while their learning have been personalized or being, or while we're having the children becoming independent learners. Also, the adaptive learning journey has also provided us the opportunity to have great tools to better understand our students' learning and modify their lessons and their learning accordingly so that we can gather or appreciate the data from them and then use this to also improve instructions from our teachers.
Fantastic, that's brilliant to hear. And finally, Jonathan, I think you probably the first person I met when I visited your school many years ago. A wonderful campus for anyone who's in Cairo. Please share with the audience where you are in terms of your rollout of adaptive technology.
Yeah, thank you, Charles, and thank you for the opportunity today. I'm very grateful to be here with you all. Yeah, I think we were one of the first schools in the region to adopt Century Tech, and Charles, yeah, you were the first one to come out with one of your colleagues. So it was 2019, I think, May 2019 when we first exposed to it. And then we fully rolled it out in September 2019 with your support. And in hindsight, it really couldn't have come at a better time, really. Having it embedded across the school pre-pandemic really put us in quite a strong position when we quite suddenly shifted to distance learning. I think it was the 12th of March that happened. And we have children from year 2. I know your content starts at year 3, but we've got children, or high ability children from year 2 right throughout senior school who are using Century effectively every day. So there are always new initiatives, platforms, technology, and buzzwords in education, but every now and again, something comes out that really excites you, and you can see huge potential in it. And when I first learned about the artificial intelligence with Century, I just thought it was genius, and I hadn't been that excited about something in education since probably Google Apps or even iPads in education, and how those things could be used effectively to support and promote learning. So Century in particular has been used extensively in our school to support the teaching and learning. the personalized pathways in particular, which promote independent learning, have really supported us and our vision to create those independent learners that we have. We are in a fortunate position in that we are an affluent school, an affluent private international school. And my fear, linking back to some of the things that Priya has just said, is that the gap possibly between some of the more affluent schools and those schools that haven't got as much opportunities. In particular in Egypt, we have quite a high incidence of illiteracy. I fear the pandemic may have widened that gap, and possibly the more affluent schools have widened that gap from those other schools.
Yeah, absolutely, and certainly something we I think have seen in the UK as well, the disadvantage gap from those who often don't have access to the infrastructure or technology that can support them in such instances. But I mean, looking at you all here today, and thinking about Priya's adoption curve, you are amongst the innovators, the early adopters, the pioneers. But I'm sure we are speaking to people here today who are thinking, AI, artificial intelligence, adaptive learning technologies, whole school rollout sounds quite daunting. It sounds like there's a lot of work behind there, a lot of kind of thinking and strategy behind that. I think maybe it'd be interesting to explore what sort of journey you went through in terms of defining a roadmap. What were you trying to achieve with this type of technology, and how did you go about setting up a strategy and a plan? Did that involve a trial? Did it involve scaled rollouts? And maybe, Jonathan, I'll go straight back to you, because as the sort of longest user of adaptive technology here, maybe you can explain what your journey looked like, and then we'll go in reverse order.
Yeah. I think firstly, it's important to consider where you currently are with your practice and where you want to be. What would be the benefits of investing in such technology? How will it supplement teaching and learning in your establishment, and how it can be used effectively? That's the important thing. How can it be used effectively? And for us at the British International School in Cairo, the rollout initially involved a number of CPD sessions delivered by yourself, Charles, and one of your colleagues across the school. There was team teaching opportunities, which was really valuable. There were sessions with parents. That was a really important part of this, to get that buy-in from the parents too, and also for the pupils as well, our main stakeholders, giving them the opportunity and exposure to this new technology that we were looking to roll out across the school. So thereafter, we created a range of in-house CPD to support staff in utilising the technology effectively. So additionally, we felt it was important that the children give their feedback on the technology, and we also had some of our champion pupils creating user videos to support other children with a range of tips and tricks on how to use Sensory Tech effectively. So I suppose, just to summarize, the main thing is the resource. First of all, having access to resources, quality CBT, and then an ongoing review and development to see how effective the practice is in your school.
Brilliant. And Abimbola, does that echo what you experienced at CIS Lagos, or how did your journey differ?
Well, the journey seems quite familiar and similar as well. However, I would like to add one or two things, to that thought. For me, and as a school, some of the things that we noticed was the fact that the teachers' beliefs and their attitude towards artificial intelligence and technology as a whole played a very major role in adapting to what we were doing. First of all, during Ebola, we already had the opportunity, or the first-hand opportunity, to adapt our school into a technology school. So in our school at CIS Lagos, we already have a year three students, key stage 2, all the way to key stage 4, having their own personal computers in their schools. So we already have a platform in which we use. So by the time that we were having to adapt to Sensory Tech, the belief system was already established. The teachers' attitudes were already established. So it was an opportunity for our staff to be able to incorporate and adapt easily. The CPD came in very easily, and then it was taken on board. We were able to get the buy-in of our student, because it was already some part or half of what they're already used to. However, Century Tech provided the opportunity for quick, fast assessment. So that was another buy-in for the teachers, and then the reduction in workload, because at the end of the day, the marking is done, misconceptions are cleared, and then even the student themselves are able to go through learning by themselves. So all those pointers helped the journey to be smoother. So that I'm having also, should I say champions? Well, maybe not really champions, but maybe specific teachers who have greater interest than others. Generally, you would have more people who were more believers than the others. So those also helped. And then in the process, it made the school system to work very well, and it facilitated the journey to a greater opportunity for the student learning to be, at its optimum.
Brilliant. And yeah, from what you've said, it sounds like you had already in place a great belief system and infrastructure, not only in terms of technology, but also the thinking and the thought process behind why certain technologies are used and how that links to pedagogy and learning. Angela, over to you in a I guess a more early stage or fledgling stage of this, but with deep experience of rolling out other technologies. What do you do when you're deciding whether to roll out this type of, or any type of technology? What kind of thought process do you go through?
Yeah, so I think to echo sort of some of the points that have already been made, I think for me, what is always one of the primary success factors is the teacher professional development and the ongoing support. I think that's always a primary success factor. And I think, what we're doing is working with Century, with your team, to sort of model or to have you model the professional development that we can then take on the capacity to sort of provide. So I think for us, that's critical. I think the second part is to integrate it into our systems, so that it's easy for teachers to use. I think one of the major challenges that our teachers have got is limited time. So we need to make this easy for them to use. We've got single sign-on. So in other words, they use the same set of credentials for this system as they do all of the other solutions that are available. So we try and make it as easy for them to adopt as possible. And then I think, again, to sort of, I suppose, model the approaches that we want to see in any solution. We don't want to overwhelm them. We want to give them information in small chunks, manageable chunks, give them ideas of what they can sort of start with. If that's working, maybe a new idea that they can implement. Excuse me. So I think that, those are some of the key sort of parts of our roadmap. And evaluating as we go along. So we're doing surveys, what's working, what's not working, what additional support do you need? We're doing best practice sharing. So, I'm even picking up some ideas from the other panelists. What are teachers doing that may work in some of our other schools? So I think that best practice sharing is really important as well. Brilliant.
And yeah, I always think that for any company who's delivering technology that's trying to move learning away from the one-size-fits-all approach, if their CPD and training is one-size-fits-all, it's sort of ironic. So yeah, tailoring towards those very different needs is incredibly important. Felix, what about you? What do you look at as a technology integration specialist when rolling out and delivering new programs?
I just want to say something first that John Dewey would say that if we teach today as we taught yesterday, then we rob our children of tomorrow. And that is something that is the heart of my principal, Miss Jenny Kotsia, because it's from there that even at the interview, when she was doing the interview for me, it's something that we could agree on. And so from the start, we knew what we were doing. Crawford International School is part of the 140 Advotech schools, some of them in South Africa. Angela might know some of them, and I've met some friends from Angela's side in Microsoft events. It's part of those schools, and so we are privileged at least to be having a wonderful opportunity to work with teachers who are willing. So Crawford International School was founded in Kenya in September 2018, and our principal, Miss Jenny, was clear on what she wanted. starting from the teachers she found, and that has really played a big role in the work that we do at this school. So I just want to mention that from the beginning, we started with an idea of which children we are raising and what world we are living in. She used to tell me that we cannot live like if we are living in 1965. We need to think like we're in 2020, 2021 going forward. And so that has been the journey. Currently, because of the initiatives she has put in place and supported the work that we do with our technology department, then we were able to even attain almost half of the innovative experts in Kenya of the total. The total is 32, and in our school we are 15. So you can see now technology implementation, whether it's adaptive for Century Tech or even for Microsoft platforms that we've been able to use to get reach to our children has been very effective. Again, also from the company's perspective, I think the vision is clear that this is the future, this is the way, computational thinking, anything that is going to bring our children closer to what it is that we are looking for, building the children of the future. In the future, preparing them for our life. Thank you.
And yeah, I think there seems to be a sort of common thread throughout what everyone's saying here. And maybe it's no surprise given you know what we've all been through over the past 12 to 18 months. But teaching is such a human profession, and I think lots of people have missed that human element as we've been sort of distance learning and Zoom learning. And what I'm hearing is that you know, technology should be used as a tool, as an aid to what we're doing, or to amplify what we're doing in certain instances. And I've certainly been at conferences or events where I've seen a fear from teachers around technology, a fear that AI, machine learning, facial recognition software, lots of things are going to replace elements of what they're doing and sideline teachers. I wonder if you know, each of you could maybe address that and actually offer some advice to leaders who are looking at their teaching body and thinking, well, you know I've got a couple of key people who are technology enthusiasts, but how am I going to bring on board the entire school? How am I going to elevate and help my teacher body upskill themselves? And maybe Abimbola, we'll start with you on that question.
Okay, that's very interesting because I think about 2 weeks ago, I posted something on LinkedIn with someone that I said, is technology driving teachers or teachers are driving technology? And a couple of people did share their thoughts with me. First of all, there's some professor in, I think, New York University that I love something that I read from him. I think it was maybe Professor Yan Lee Khan or something like that. He said, our intelligence is what makes us human, and AI is an extension of that quality. And because AI is an extension of that quality of what makes us human, no teacher should be afraid of artificial intelligence. In fact, I would like to say that every teacher or every human being should embrace artificial intelligence because of its ability to help, for teachers in particular, reduce the workload. For example, a lot of teachers all over the world, they are backing out of teaching because of the amount of workload that it involves. So because of that, AI is here to stay because it seems like it's the reality that we're faced with. In order to help teachers and my colleagues, because I'm also a teacher, I would like to say, have an open mind. Be ready to upscale your skills and your competencies. Your ability to go through something that is new is an advantage. And because this is an advantage, it is impossible to have a machine at every single time connect with children. We need us to support what the artificial intelligence is providing for us so that we can help our children to personalize their learning, to improve the students' engagement, and at the end of the day, create a global opportunity for our students to learn and connect with the world. Right now, there's a huge data out there saying, oh, these number of millions or billions of students in 2030, they're going to be behind. And then these number of children are going to become, if not properly managed, they'll become like a risk to the society. Embracing this opportunity empowers every teacher to become the best, to become a lifelong learner, to simplify even complex concept into easier ones for the students. So the fear of AI is not anything that I would encourage any student or any of my colleagues to embrace. I think it's a great opportunity, even just because of the connection alone, it's valid. We all want our students to perform at optimum. We want our students to have excellent track record of development and growth. And there's nothing we can do with machines without the human connection. There's nothing we can do with humans and robots with well-being. We need us again. So the connection point for me is something that we need to establish, we need to embrace, we need to amplify, so that at the end of the day, the machine is doing its job and the humans are doing their jobs.
Couldn't agree more, and super inspirational. So much literature at the moment about how, not literature, sorry, or just written work about how lonely the world is at the moment because of disconnection and how that's affecting all sorts, from politics to crime. And I think you're absolutely right. That connection, that human element, has the ability to be amplified from using certain types of technology in certain ways. So great to hear. Jonathan, over to you. I mean, 2 years of training teachers on using certain technologies. How has that shaped over the years? Have you got everyone on board now, or are there still people who are kicking and screaming and saying, no, we don't want to use technology? What have you been through?
Yeah. I think again, it's hard not to reflect back to the pandemic. It's cropping up in conversation almost constantly. But I'm very proud of the profession, of the teaching profession, and how we have learned, how we upskilled at an exponential rate over the last sort of 18 months as a result of the pandemic. How we've had to shift from that face-to-face learning to distance learning in such a short period, and in particular in our school, there hasn't been much choice really, and staff have just had to upskill. And it's quality CPD has supported us with that. It's hugely important. You're always going to get a mixture of staff in their confidence in using technology. So that's a huge element of this, is the confidence and supporting those who are less confident. Targeted CPD to support those staff, having sort of manageable expectations, so that staff don't get easily overwhelmed at first, because first impressions are key. And as with any new platform, it can be overwhelming for staff. So when we first reverted to distance learning early in March, we centralized all our CPD videos. We did find that the videos that Century had were really, really useful. So you have your individual guides to support teachers in using the different areas of the platform. But we also liked to create our own videos as well. They seem to be more effective, in addition to what the children created as well for their peers, to support them in using Century effectively. So yeah, just CPD, quality CPD was huge in embedding Century effectively across the school for us.
Brilliant, thank you. And Angela, you've spent your career, I guess, as an advocate of technology, so you will have seen everything from early adopters to the laggards. What can you share from your experience of how to bring that body along with you?
Yeah, I think, Charles, you mentioned it before. It's about modeling. So we're working with a smaller group of pilot schools. We've had them volunteer. So we're not forcing schools to be part of the journey. They're volunteered. And then we will find ways to sort of slowly demonstrate the learnings and what's possible. And I think, the real power with technology is to play a role that a teacher just physically can't do in a day, especially managing a class of 25, 30, often more. So, you know, again, taking away that administration and leveraging the information that a platform like Sentry, an adaptive learning platform, can give to improve that teaching experience, that learning experience, whether it be in the classroom or online. So if we can demonstrate that and show how teachers can save time, because, you know, like I mentioned, I think that's still, you know, one of our primary challenges is teachers' lack of time. Then I think that will be critical in terms of our journey of adoption.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great to hear. And I suppose what you've just described could be modeled down into an individual school. You seek for your volunteers, who's going to drive this, and then you cascade that enthusiasm throughout a school. So brilliant, thank you. And Felix, from your perspective, what do you keynote a lot, you talk to teachers a lot, you inspire people, I guess, through your STEAM curriculum. What do you think is key to engaging people in things that might be worrying or fearful to them because of lack of confidence or understanding?
Thank you very much. I think the first thing I find with educators across, whether it is in private, public, or even the independent schools, it's that there seems to be a lack of leadership and vision for what is it that we are doing. When the keynote speaker was speaking, Ms. Priya, regarding what the numbers we need to raise in Africa, for example, we talk about 17 million more teachers, not what we have. Yet the teachers that we have currently are still striking because of poor payment, or and a lot that goes into the classroom. And then the ones that we have in independent schools, they are too busy meeting other deadlines, which are very important. But I think sometimes, like Ms. Donsun said, it's that technology is here to help reduce the workload and achieve goals faster for the teacher. Because always the question when I talk to teachers is, what is in for me? Is it always about 21st century students and all that? And so the question is, what is in for the teachers? And so I feel the biggest place where we need to start as education leaders, like the school leaders, the directors, Angela and the team, the place where I think we need to invest on so much that people can get the buy-in is in leadership and policy. Because once that has been put forward, then teaching and learning, student success, those things will come in place handy and very fast. So with leadership and policy, then followed by now investing in the teachers, that is the CPD, that is PD, in terms of teaching and learning, the ability, what is this technology coming to do? And thirdly, now in looking at the student success, are they able to access that platform? Do they understand? Because again, you don't want to be teaching the technology, you want to be teaching the content that comes into it. And so those three things, of course, coupled with the intelligent environments in terms of what technologies you're bringing on board to sustain that, will be a key role. Even as I say that, it's important to mention that, teachers are always ready. And I'm saying that with a lot of carefulness. I know teachers have the best interest. And so the biggest thing has always been, how do I bridge between intent of what I want to do? I'm so excited about my class. I'm a class teacher, and I get excited about these children, but the intent is good. But if the students do not like what I'm doing, it's a waste of time. So teachers have so many technologies to take from. They have AI, they have platforms that giving content. One thing I appreciate Century Tech is that it has brought everything together, like several subjects, not just one subject like mathematics or English or as a standalone. And so that way you have one house place where you can you're able to get everything from the same place. So the encouragement is that if we can have a leadership and policy, that school leaders, my boss is very good at this, just putting it out there that this is where we are going, from here to there, then they see where they are supposed to go. Whatever adaptive technology you're going to bring on board, it's going to go well with them. Thank you.
Fantastic. And I've looked at the sort of questions that are coming through in the audience. And I know I said we'd leave the questions to the end, but there are a couple that are particularly relevant maybe to what we're just talking about. So I'll throw this question out there. We don't have to all go through it, but if someone feels like they have something to add, please just speak up. So we have Dr. Bashuru Sadiku, who's asking, how can we use technology to achieve quality assurance in the area of monitoring and evaluation in our schools in the new normal? So I assume he's referring to assessment processes as well as sort of wider evaluation, possibly of teachers, of CPD. But I just wonder if any of you have insights as to what you've done during the pandemic to ensure that quality assurance in evaluation. Over to anyone who's got comments.
Okay,
I can start. No, go for it.
Okay, Abimbola, we'll start with you and then Angela. Yeah, great.
Mm-hmm.
If I may, first of all, I like that question because there's been a lot of thought about assessment and assessment and assessment. First of all, is assessment for the student or the student for assessment? That's something I'd like us to chew on, as we go along, and then something that we need to think about. Because we want to test the children just to know where they're at so that we can know how to tweak our instructions, then we might need to rethink what assessment is along the line. That's number one. Number two, to check whether the quality assurance for teaching and learning. I know at CIS that we used, I can't remember the name of the software now, but the children have opportunity to actually see their exams in front of this software, and then it actually watches them if they move or change their side or their line of action or thought. No, I mean like on their computer, and then they go off. It would technically tell whoever that is behind that child is going off, and then the quality assurance, was quite put in place, and that helped a lot. And that has worked for us all through the pandemic. At the same time, when you look at assessment should be ongoing. Checking a child's learning should be something that is ongoing. The moment we begin to think of assessment as judgment, it loses its purpose. So sometimes I think that we should think through why we're doing the assessment and what it is that we want to get from the assessment. This is a big deal during the pandemic, by the way, because a lot of people are rethinking assessment at the same time.
Brilliant. So huge emphasis I'm hearing on formative assessment and changing that perception of what assessment is. And there's been tons of studies, haven't there, on students having this perception that assessment is just a diagnosis tool, or just a baselining tool, so they can see where they are in relation to their peers, rather than a tool for learning as a process that learning. Angela, you had something to add as well.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I think with monitoring, but before we look at monitoring, we've actually got to make sure that the design of the system is effective. And I think that's one of the things I really liked about Century, is that it takes into account, good solid learning theories. And I see Victor's just asked a question around sort of learners' concentration. So things like cognitive load theory, learners can only take in so much information at a time. So how do we make sure that a system is designed to take that into account? Linking to assessment, and I suppose the monitoring is, making sure that activities are designed to actually cement the learning and for memory and knowledge retention. So retrieval practice, or sort of interleaving, or, things like that. So that the actual design supports the learning process. And then when monitoring happens, we've got a holistic view on what's actually taken place.
Couldn't agree more. And I think involving students in that and actually looking at a lot of the high performance learning schools around the world who teach their children about metacognition and how that affects their learning, I think is empowering our young learners to better understand learning processes for them. Great. I'm sort of also conscious of time, and I want to sort of pose my final question to you all, which sort of big picture thinking, and we are here talking about the future of Africa and the future of education, and it feels like AI is more of the now rather than the future. So I just wondered, if thinking specifically of educational technology, where do each of you see the educational technology landscape going? What do you think we'll see in our classrooms in 10 years' time? And maybe we'll start with Jonathan in Cairo.
Thanks, Charles. It's really hard to say, really. It all depends, really, whether we can break down those barriers between some of those rich and poorer schools. But there's absolutely huge scope to develop technology such as AI in Century, you know, around the world. It has huge potential to support personalized and independent learning, and does make the role of the teacher much easier, I suppose, and frees up time for them to focus on other priorities. It does make you question as well the role of the teacher. I do see the role of the teacher more as a facilitator now, rather than as a traditional teacher. Yeah, that's my feedback, Charles.
No, that's great, and actually a lot of what you initially said there and said in previous comments, I think, is being echoed in people talking in the chat. And possibly one of the biggest elephants in the room is infrastructure, connectivity, and the divide between those who can access things and those who can't access things. And I think it actually comes back to Felix's points earlier on about we have to influence and change policy and decision makers up to ministerial and government level, because they're the people who have the ability to you know, lean on resources and make sure that technologies like this can become accessible. I think actually AI, although it's an expensive technology to develop, it has the ability to scale up at a very economic rate, as long as you're sort of working with the relevant authorities and partners. And I would love it if Century had been, you know, funded by a government but it wasn't, and it started off as a private company, as now a social impact company, which is great. But it's leaders like yourselves and your schools who are going to pioneer and show the impact of this technology that will then influence governments and pioneers in ministries of education. So I think it's slow, but we will get there where children, no matter their background, no matter their infrastructure, will be able to access these types of technology. That's my thought anyway. But over to Felix on the future of educational technology. What are your thoughts on that subject?
First of all, I want to acknowledge that in my interaction with public school teachers, I find great eagerness and desire to learn more. Now, one of our key leaders here, and it's called PLO Lumumba, says the problem we have in Africa, and I think it's not even Africa, it's around the world, is that the people with ideas are seated in class. The street bureaucrats, the teachers are the main guys. Because whether you come up with a policy also, and I'm also responding to someone who mentioned something, whether you're talking about a good policy and you've put up together everything, the KPIs for monitoring and everything else, the street bureaucrat remains to be the teacher, the person who implements it however they want. If you tell them they have to teach with Bloom's taxonomy, and all they think about right now is to talk to that child who has not eaten food yesterday. You know, so we have to really involve everyone. So the people with ideas are in the classrooms, and of course, I'm not trying to diminish places and people who are leading us. The people with ideas are the people who are really involved in the real thing. And so for the leadership, I feel it's not that they don't have ideas, but if they can consult more, if they can be holistic, they can push together, they can, you know, involve everyone. And I know it will take a long time, but if we are going to ensure that Africa, for example, is out of crime, it's out of poverty and hunger, and then the Sustainable Development Goals as we see them, the 2030 agenda, is going to be, it's going to be real, then we're going to pull together. We're going to have those barazas. We call them barazas in Swahili, in Kenya. You know, if we are going to have those discussions, fora, where people talk, then I'm very sure things are going to go well. And so when it comes to educational technology, there are great opportunities. I'm very sure when we started buying phones, one mobile phone used to be very expensive, and it used to be maybe at several dollars. But if you go to the streets right now and you look at the data around the mobile and Android gadgets penetration in Africa, it is huge, and that's an opportunity. So it tells you over time, even the platforms that Century Tech now are trying to make, and other organizations that are trying to think about educational technologies, whether it is AI, whether it's just what we call it .2, I can't remember the exact name, you know, whether it is all that, it's going to be, you know, very accessible to many people. And so my cry is with my governments in Africa and beyond, if they can actually see where we're seeing, not investing in big fintech companies, but really involving themselves in the area of edtech instead, whereby, yes, they build health tech, they deal with fintech, but now they invest fully on educational technology. But let me say this as I conclude, that education doesn't seem to motivate voters. I read from the Miseducation of the Negro. So if we can invest, you know, in education, then we will not even be talking about, I'm sorry to say, but it will not be thinking about TVET, which is reskilling people. We will have done that early. The 414 window is the place to invest, guys. If we can do that, I'm very sure we are going to be in the right place. The skills are with the young people, and as they go, they will develop. We not need to worry about unemployment. It will be sorted out. So the future is great. Educational technology will go, will continue being accessible to people. I like what Century Tech have done, but I'm very sure over time it's going to be, available to many people as we go on. So I wish you the best. You get support from us who are going to be in the government in the next few years, and I hope it's well.
Super positive, Felix. Thanks for that finishing note from you. And Angela, final comments in terms of that question of the future of educational technology?
So I agree. I think, you know, we've got to keep focusing on getting all of the sort of foundational aspects right, making sure people have got access to devices, good internet, the skills to use it. Once, you know, and I think that's an ongoing process. I think without question, adaptive learning platforms will continue to sort of rise. It makes sense. You know, I think, like I said in the beginning, one of the main goals of any teacher is to provide that personalized learning opportunity for every student. And really, I think adaptive learning platforms that truly leverage AI are the tools that can help us to do that. I think it's going to be interesting to see, you know, what AR and VR can do in the education space. I think maybe not in every subject, but it's a great opportunity for sort of simulated applications. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in that space too.
Love that, brilliant. And Abimbola, final comments from you regarding that question.
Okay, so I agree with everything that has been said earlier. And I really, really do agree with the policy, you know, that there's need for a change in policies all across Africa. While that has been said, I see that the future right now is that very soon we might not have brick walls as schools anymore, because the technology would technically just need human touch with people learning online. And then people will socialize more because they just want to connect, having gained the knowledge online. It will help to eliminate boundaries. I see that many boundaries will be eliminated. I see that there will be globalization in knowledge. And I can see that we would gain more skilled and competent humans as teachers. So I would say that the future is bright for Africa. That is the truth, because Africans are excellently intelligent and brilliant. I am telling you, just give us few more time. So I would say time, technology, and teachers were the 3 T's for the world from Africa. Thank you.
Brilliant. What a positive note to end on. And I think the hundreds of people who are tuning in, listening to you today will all join me in thanking you each for coming here today, taking time out of your, I'm sure, busy schedules, and sharing with the audience insights around this really important topic. So Angela, Jonathan, Felix, and Abimbola, thank you all very much for your time today. It's been super exciting, and I can't wait to see you all again in person when that is allowed. But yeah, hope you enjoy the rest of the show. And Tom, back over to you.
Great, thank you all. What another incredible session. I thought, you know, after Emma and Priya, we couldn't go any higher, but we have. Really, truly inspiring. And so thanks, Felix, Ambola, Angela, and Jonathan. I thought it was incredible. Takes me back to my time teaching in Africa, and I was back there now to implement some of the things you said. A little reminder, we've got the Twitter handles there and the hashtag. Please do keep tweeting, keep engaging, and also keep going in the chat and the Q&A as well. It's great to see and fascinating to see. I think one of the so many things I tried to write down when everyone was speaking. It was fascinating. One of the, I think, top quotes from them was from Felix, was, "If we teach today as we taught yesterday, then we lose tomorrow." I think that's absolutely great. And such a great thing, a mantra for us all to take from today. So what we're now going to have, we've reached just about the halfway stage of our summit this morning. We've got a 10-minute break. So a little comfort break, grab a tea, grab a coffee, grab a bite to eat if you need to, and we'll be back at 10:40 BST to continue the second half of the session.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening even to everyone who's joining us here today. Welcome back to the second half of the Africa Future Learning Summit. I hope you've managed to stretch your legs and grab a drink during the break. My name is Rachel Rogers and I'm the International Manager at GL Education. I'm joining you today from a rather wet and grey Staffordshire here, but I must say it's really brightened my morning listening to all the great speakers that we've had on so far. I was really staggered by some of the numbers that Emma and Priya shared in their sessions in particular. And I think, although there's clearly challenges ahead, I think what I took certainly from the end of the panel session is that the future is definitely bright for Africa. So we're going to kick off the second half today with, I'd like to introduce our International Director at GL, Amanda Clarke, who's going to be taking you through her session looking at Africa education in a global context. We're really lucky to have Amanda join us here at GL just last year. She spent 9 years at Scholastic, where she worked as Director of Sales covering the Middle East and Africa before going on to look after special projects with NGOs and ministries of education worldwide. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Amanda.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm honoured to be addressing you all at today's conference, and it's great to see so many schools that I've had the privilege to visit in the past. So hello, old friends. I hope to be able to travel and see you all again very soon. I've worked across Africa for close to 10 years and in the international education arena for close to 20 years. And I can say with confidence that these past few months have been the most challenging that I've ever witnessed in our field, and my respect to educationalists globally has increased beyond words. It was hugely insightful to hear Emma's introduction highlighting the innovation that's currently ongoing in Africa, resulting in it having 5 of the 10 world's fastest growing economies. The future maintenance of this growth lies within the students of today. How can we ensure that they're developing the necessary skills to thrive in a technology-driven and globalized world? Adversity allows us the opportunity to find out what we're capable of, to develop our strengths and to access aspects of ourselves that we didn't know existed, and inner resources that we didn't know we had, which inviting us to sort of rethink how we're assessing students and measuring what they need to know and how we want them to develop. This is the first time in history that we're able to really know what the impact of a major world event has on our children's learning. This is the first big crisis where we've had this kind of data, and in time, this will enable us to have a full picture so that we can directly address and bridge those gaps in learning that we've identified effectively, but also with sensitivity. Our Words of Encouragement report that was sent out a few weeks ago and referenced in this morning's Times and the TES, and our impact of COVID-19 on attainment, the initial analysis report that was sent out in February, outlines some of our initial findings. The reports address the key questions of how have our children coped? How has lockdown impacted their academic performance, their mental well-being and their social skills? It'll take some time to measure the long-term impact on students, but we have been able to do some initial analysis of the impact on students globally. Educationalists are going to be forced to play a very long game here, just as everyone now understands that COVID isn't just a 3 to 6 month issue. This is the same for education, as we take stock of the subsequent repercussions resulting from COVID on student attainment. Broadly speaking, there have been fears about significant learning loss as a result of the pandemic. A global survey of teachers by McKinsey reported that students were on average 2 months behind where they usually would have been in November 2020. Data that we've collected from our attainment and reading assessments, as well as our attitudes to learning survey, PASS, for those of you who are familiar with it, gives us a snapshot of the global picture. So let's take attainment, for example. On average, attainment has fallen across all subjects. Between 2019 and 2020, maths and science were found to have declined the most. English and reading were less affected, with much smaller declines. But interestingly, girls were more affected than boys. In normal circumstances, boys generally perform better than girls in mathematics, but during the pandemic, this gap in attainment has widened further. Girls normally perform better than boys in English and reading, but this year that gap has narrowed. That said, and this quote is taken directly from the report, from the data available so far, there are reasons to believe that in international schools, the reading ability of students has held up remarkably well, not only in comparison to previous years, but also in comparison to UK schools. So what could the longer term implications of shifts in attainment, the sort of long COVID effect, if you like, have on the wider curriculum? We've previously published a report called Read All About It, which highlighted the strong correlation between reading ability and the eventual exam success in subjects across the curriculum. For example, high scores in reading were strongly correlated with good performance in maths and science, as well as English and the art subjects. As reading has generally not been impacted by closures, there is a reason to believe that access to the wider curriculum has not been curtailed as much as expected. So anecdotally, schools have actually seen an increase in students' text-based skills during the pandemic. Teachers have suggested that the mode of delivery, where the majority of remote teaching relied on text-based assignments, may have influenced this. And then let's look at attitudes towards learning. Again, as cautious optimism is possible here too, students' attitudes to school has remained broadly in line with pre-pandemic levels. There are some concerns around students' attitudes towards their own abilities as learners and their own levels of confidence in themselves. And this is particularly true of those with a lower reading ability in 2020. So while the global picture described is generally positive, it's important to focus on the local picture as well, right down to the individual student. In Africa, GL is currently working with over 150 schools across 23 African countries, helping them on their data journey. And we're really keen to work with many more schools across Africa to support them in developing their understanding of their students, thereby enabling them to reach or exceed their potential. This will ensure that they're ready to contribute to an exciting and fast-paced globalised future for countries across the continent. Our panel discussion will focus on the picture across several African countries and their approach that schools in this region have taken to assessment before and during the pandemic, focusing on the panelists' thoughts on what the future holds for education and assessment in Africa. So I'm really looking forward to being part of the discussion about the evolving educational landscape across countries in Africa. And GL aims to support schools across the continent in their commitment to develop students with the skills to thrive in a tech-driven and globalized world. So thank you very much. I'll hand back to Rachel now.
Thanks, Amanda. Really good to hear your analysis, in particular on looking at the impact of lockdown and how that's affected students' learning. I know from my own personal point of view, being able to look at the data that we collect at GL and looking at the analysis of how lockdowns all over the world have impacted on students, and comparing that just to my own personal experience. I've got 2 sons at home at different ages and completely different impact that lockdown has had on them. And we've really seen that from our data that actually there's a much wider variability in students at the moment. So uncovering and identifying those students and how we can help them has certainly been key to support them to get on track as we move forward again. So I'm really pleased to introduce our next panel session, which will be looking at how we can make an impact with data, understanding ability, tracking attainment, and uncovering some of the hidden barriers to learning. This session will be hosted by my colleague, Priya Shah. Priya is a senior consultant at GL Education who's been working with schools across Africa since he joined us in 2018. Prior to this, Priya was a maths teacher and an assessment coordinator at a school in Nepal. And I know he really still is passionate about how assessment can support teachers to really enable each and every student to realise their full potential. So Priya, over to you.
Great, thank you. Thanks very much, Rachel. And thank you to everyone who's spoken so far. It's been really, really insightful to hear everyone's thoughts and what they see the future for African learning being. So in a moment, I'll introduce the panelists, but I'd just like to first of all thank them for giving us their time and expertise. I'm sure we'll learn a lot from all of you. And of course, it's been a pleasure for me to work with you during the preparation for this event and of course before. So this panel will focus on the use of data to help to understand all of our students' abilities, attainments and barriers to learning more deeply, to ensure that they are developing all of the skills necessary to be successful in a globalized world and of course across the African continent. I see it very much as technology being the enabler, which supports the expertise of teachers. And we must also focus on what is most effective for students in the wide variety of contexts that has been really highlighted in the chat box, I think, that we're all faced with. And also thank you to Amanda for outlining the global situation, particularly in this pandemic era that we're living in. The panel that we're going to have will now focus on the situation specifically across countries and schools in Africa. We will be happy to take audience questions. If you could please put those into the Q&A box so we can see them, and we'll come to them towards the end of the session. Also, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you do have any further questions after the event. So without further ado, I'll introduce the 4 panelists who it's a pleasure to have with us today, starting off with Kipani Bila, who is currently the assistant head of the senior school at CIS Lagos and also co-head at Chatsworth Sixth Form College also in Lagos. His education, teacher training and early teaching career all took place in Nottingham in the UK before he moved to London, and he's taught extensively in UK state and independent schools before moving to Nigeria. Over the years, he's held positions from different positions from head of physics to assessment coordinator to head of Key Stage 4. Good morning, Mr. Bila.
Good morning, Priya. Good morning, everyone else.
So next, I'll introduce Doris Kwambo, who's currently the principal at the Amana Elementary School in Kenya. She has a vast array of experience as a teacher, both within Kenya in the private school sector and abroad. Doris had a brief stint as a visiting teacher at Cranley Prep in Surrey in the UK, but she's also worked at a wide range of schools all over Kenya in the teaching and leadership roles. The highlight of her teaching experience was when she was selected as a Global Scholars Educator Ambassador for the Leadership Camp for International High School students at the African Leadership Academy in South Africa. Hi, Doris.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here.
Great to have you. Next, I'll introduce Callum, who is currently the head of maths for the primary school at Malvern College in Cairo, Egypt. He also studied and gained his teaching qualification in the UK, and currently, in addition to being the head of maths, where his primary role is as a Year 6 class teacher, he also works closely with the primary leadership team with a particular focus on assessment data, and also volunteers as part of the school's teaching and learning committee to utilise any collected data for the benefit of students and for staff. Morning, Callum.
Good morning, Via, and good morning all. Very happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. And finally, Lee Hill, who's currently the Group Curriculum and Standards Officer for the Braeburn Group of Schools, also in Kenya. Lee is an experienced senior leader and a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Education Assessors with a proven track record in successful educational leadership, both in the UK and in international settings, and also across primary and secondary phases. Lee has extensive experience of designing, implementing and driving pupil tracking and monitoring systems to ensure high levels of pupil attainment, achievement and progress. Morning, Lee.
Good morning, and morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. I think we'll kick off with a sort of a scene-setting opening question, and this will be for everyone on the panel. So, as a school or a group, in Lee's case, where are you in your assessment data journey and use of digital testing to assist with this? So I guess some of the things you might want to touch on is the primary purpose of formative assessment in your school, and also specifically where you are in your journey, so how long you've been using it for, what have been your biggest wins so far, next steps, and anything else that you think is relevant. So if I started with Lee, that would be great.
Okay, thank you. Well, like most schools, I think Braeburn has been on a significant journey. We have a 41-year history of delivering high-quality education in Kenya and in Tanzania. But I think if we were to be completely honest and think about where we were with data, we were a little bit behind the curve. I think prior to 2015, we were just using data as a means to report performance to parents, or to fill in reports that then went to head office once a year in our school evaluation form. What we weren't doing is using the information or the data to feed back into the classroom. Now, 2016 gave us the opportunity to introduce CAP4 to our schools. We've been using other systems to generate baseline targets, but what we liked about CAP4 was it gave us the ability to take into account the neuroplasticity of our pupils. So it was a much better fit for an international school. Once the schools started to engage with the CAP4, we also offered them the ability to use the PASS test. And I'll come back to that a little bit later, because I'll be honest with you, PASS fell flat when we first introduced it. The schools all did the test, but they didn't know what to do with the data. And I think that was kind of a recurring theme as we've moved forward. We became really data rich, but we weren't quite sure what we were supposed to be doing with it. If we fast forward now and to 2017 to 19, this is when we could actually, as a group, honestly answer the question, what does formative assessment mean for your schools? because it was at this point that the schools started to use the data to analyze what was going on in as a result of their interim assessment, and to feed that back in terms of, okay, do we need to intervene? Do we need more differentiation? Do we need to reteach? We were rapidly becoming where we're heading now, which is becoming a data-driven school. What was interesting was, as we were going on that journey, we started discovering other holes. So, for example, we realized that whilst our curriculum was exceptional, we have really highly qualified practitioners, at Key Stage 3, we just weren't assessing the progress well. There was a huge gap in what we were offering. Although we had our interim assessments, they were nowhere near as robust as our GCSE or our IB courses. And so we looked again to GL, and we worked with you, Veer, about, okay, help us fill this gap. And so we examined the progress tests, and we decided that we'd again trial them. It's been a perfect fit for most of our schools. Now, I'm not going to say all of our schools are using them, but we're now starting to encourage them to at least look at the progress in maths and progress in English. And one of our schools, Brabourne Garden Estate, who was an early adopter of this, is absolutely instrumental in sharing their good practice with the rest of the group. Now, if we fast forward to now, where are we now? Well, as I say, we're rapidly becoming a data-driven school, group of schools. What we've introduced to support that is my role, if you like, which is to help the schools on their individual journeys, to take away that barrier of the data crunching from them and all the heavy assessment work, to allow them to do the job that they need to do with the data. I think one of the panelists earlier talked about teachers drowning. What we're trying to do as a group now is to get them all on the same boat, to get them all working in the same direction, using the data in the same way to inform teaching and learning. Because what we've discovered as a result of this pandemic is you can't just look at the children using two sides of the data triangle, which we have been. We were looking at aptitude, so our GL Cat 4 tests. We were looking at attainment. What are they getting at the end? What we've realized now is we need that third lens. So we need the attitude, and that's where the PASS has become vital to us in supporting not only high levels of teaching and learning in our schools, but also well-being, and making sure that, you know, at the end of the day, we do have confident learners in Brabourne that are enjoying success. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks. I think it's a couple of things really important there. So we can collect all the data that we want, but if it's not used, then it's useless, isn't it? So I think it's really important to really focus on utilising that data in the best way possible. So thank you for that, Lee. Callum, what are your thoughts and your sort of experiences so far at Malvern?
Well, it's very interesting that Lee was discussing going from a wealth of experience and years as a group of schools to having so much data and needing to work with that in a very short space of time. At Malvern College, we've only been open about 5 years, and we've been pulling on the wealth of experience from teachers from all across the world with our connections in Malvern College UK. And so it's only really been over the past 4 years since Malvern's second year in action that we've been looking at that data and what we can really do with it. What kick-started it actually was the idea simply of a data analysis, of a gap analysis, typically used with maths assessments. When you introduce a gap analysis to teachers who have a wealth of experience, sometimes teachers can butt heads with that idea and say, well, what are you looking for this? Are you looking to question my teaching? You should be trusting my teaching. I have a lot more experience than you do. And so this is one of our first barriers that we'll go on to discuss a bit later. But that was the beginning of our data journey. As we went through that, we looked to see what we can use with that to inform our teaching, inform our planning, our methodology, our students' needs. Shortly after that, we very quickly took on about as much as we could from what GL could offer. We started using CAP4 in about 2017, I think it was. We started using CAP4 for our admissions assessments, start tapping into that potential, getting a nice idea where their spatial biases, where does this child come out compared to the peers, and what support would they need. We've been using the Progress Test Maths and the Progress Test English. It's been fantastic looking at historical data tracking. You're looking at the end of every academic year. Where are they now? Where should they be? And how can we best prepare them for the start of the next year? And most recently, I think in the past 2 years, we picked up the NGRT, the National Guided Reading Test as well. And this has been brilliant for identifying certainly our gifted and talented children who are further ahead of the curve, just how far ahead of the curve they are with their comprehension and how we can challenge them further, in addition to identifying those children with a very, very low reading age, as you would with any reading test. So with our data journey, we've progressed very quickly and really taking on as much as we can. The primary purpose that we've had from our formative assessments has been to confirm objectively what we already know subjectively. As I mentioned before, many teachers are using their wealth of experience saying, I know what I'm doing, I've been teaching for this many years, surely you shouldn't question me. And actually, we use that teacher judgment that's on that external lens of that student development, teacher judgment to inform, that's become incredibly pertinent, especially with the IGCSE level, about how teacher judgments has been used to inform those end of year grades. So by having our GL and having formative assessments, it's been confirming for all our teachers what we know subjectively. So having that unquestionable data to support with our, obviously our teacher knowledge. Where we are going in the future is to look at qualitative data, and lockdown started to indicate its needs for that. Actually, the students' well-being that Lee was mentioning before, that's becoming such a huge barrier to our students' learning and to various other parts of their childhood, in short. So we're very data-driven, and we're now starting to look at the importance of that qualitative data from teacher judgment to see how we can best support those children on an individual level.
Great, thanks, Adam. I think both Lee and you have mentioned student well-being, which I think the pandemic has really kind of brought to the forefront of everyone's minds. And collecting that qualitative data, I think, is super important, as you mentioned. Kipani, where are you with CIS Lagos and on your journey so far, and where do you see it going in the future?
Thank you, Via. Just like Leah and Callum have said, I think our journeys are quite similar. We also started just by having data and just accumulating data and not using it effectively. But over the years, we've been using CAT4 as well. We've been using GL assessment tools, different data that GL provide, especially CAT4 progress tests. And recently, we also adopted PASS. We've been using them for over 8 to 9 years now. So primarily we use the data to feedback actually on our planning, especially for the teachers. They need to understand, they need to understand where the students are at and how they can tweak their planning, especially their medium-term plans, what intervention strategies they can put in place, and also check the progress and the understanding of the students. What we have found really helpful is that with the CAT4, with the students' biases, we are able to identify the different teaching and learning strategies we can put in place in the classroom in order to prioritize on our personalized learning for the students, which is really key because if we adopt the one fits all mantra, it doesn't help. And we realized that the indicators give us the direction of where the students may get if they follow the natural pathway. But over the years, with what we put in place, we have realized that we can actually get the students to perform better than what the indicators give us. And it's really important. One of the things we also realize is that CAT4 gives us pointers. What can we do to help the students? So if a student is biased towards one battery, what can we do? What intervention strategies can we put in place? So we look at those and then we contextualize them and then we adapt them and come up with something completely different. We have also, as I said, we have also started using PASS recently, and this has really, really helped because one of the biggest, I think we will talk about it when we focus on barriers, but one of the biggest things that a lot of institutions or a lot of teachers tend to neglect, we tend to think that assessment is only about attainment. We're only assessing the content that they're learning in the classroom. We forget that we need to actually also assess the well-being of the students. We also need to assess how they feel about themselves, how they feel about school. And when we do this on a regular basis, we actually get to know whether we are putting the right strategies pastorally in place, or whether we are doing the right things in terms of our intervention strategies, especially for many schools in Africa where we do not have the same external agencies as we may have in places like England. The schools tend to be the ones that do everything for that. So the next steps for us, we are also looking at adopting the reading test because literacy is key. One of the speakers earlier mentioned that literacy underpins when students are literate and their literacy skills are higher, they do well in mathematics, they do well in other subjects. And pretty much for us, we have identified that if literacy is embedded across the different subject areas, then the students are going to do well in those subject areas. So for us to actually be able to measure objectively the literacy skills of the students periodically will help us in terms of making sure that they progress well.
Great, thank you very much. I think a couple of key points there. One size fits all doesn't work. I think we're aware of that, and it's really important to kind of use all the tools possible for personalizing learning for each individual student as much as possible. And also literacy. I think there's a common misconception that literacy only applies to English as a subject, but actually, of course, it matters across the board. So yeah, really important to focus on that. And Doris, if you could give us an outline of where you currently are and where you think you're heading, that would be great.
Okay, so Aman Elementary School is really the baby in this whole group. This school started in January 2020, 11 weeks on COVID. And we offer the national curriculum of Kenya. However, we are also swimming with the sharks because as we deliver the national curriculum, the CBC, we also want to have an international standard. So we are in the process of collecting our data. We're really building this up. I'm proud to say that during the online lessons, the remote learning program, we were able to have the children do the CAT4 assessment. So our grade 1 and grade 2 children, and that gave us insight as well. And one of the things that we were able to notice was the children needed more exposure with the spatial awareness batteries. Not that it has anything to do with their intelligence or anything, it's just exposure. So that was something we took on deliberately and introduced critical thinking activities on a weekly basis, even while the children were on remote learning. And when it came back to in-person learning, we focus on that as well, because those are the skills that the new curriculum wants to make sure that the children have as they go through their schooling. So Amana School is able to do that. And I've said we have our eyes on the ball. We are setting out to make sure that that our children have an international outlook, again, with skills and knowledge. And so in terms of data, our international one so far is CAT4. We're looking towards doing the progress test where we've had discussions is that. And then we've also, as CBC is being rolled out, we are in the lower primary section of CBC, and the assessments that are out now are, what are they? At the start of when we came back into school, they had entry assessments just to see the impact of learning. So our children in grade 1 and 2 did that. And I'm happy to say that the focus area was English, Maths, and Kiswahili. With English and Maths, we exceeded expectations. They're national exams, but they were marked in-house. I know for certain we exceeded expectations. Where we have work to do is with Kiswahili. However, that data, again, it will help us inform our learning. So we are, as I've said, we're in the process of just building up our data, but we have our in-house assessments, which we carried on even when the children were in online learning. We worked around it, so we didn't have a formal assessment session, but we had the learning packs as assessment tools. The children were encouraged to work as independently as possible. The packs were sent back to school. The children are able, the parents, the teachers are able to see the quality of the children's work, the progress that they're making, and feedback that way. So we have the CAT4, we have our in-house assessments. We also have the online resources, international resources. We've invested in Pearson as well. So we use that for our teaching and learning and assessment. And just as schools closed, we were looking into Study Ladder. So that's where we're at. We are ready to take anything on board to take our children forward.
Great, thank you very much. Sounds really exciting. And I think you touched on a really key point there about critical thinking, and that being a very important skill for students to develop so that they are able to access all the opportunities available to them in the future. Great, so I think we'll stick with you, Doris, for the next question, if that's okay. So just briefly, I guess, just looking at a little bit back at what's gone on so far this year, what impact have you noticed on attainment, which I think you kind of touched on already, but what impact have you noticed on the attainment of students because of the pandemic in your respective schools and countries? And I guess it's also touching a little bit on, has this changed the way that you've assessed your students in any way as well?
All right, so Vera, I need to remind you that when we started in January, we were barely 11 weeks. So we were, we hardly had any data really, apart from the teacher-based data. The CAT4 assessment was done while the children were in the remote learning program. However, we were pleased with those results. It gave us insight to what the children know. And then again, just communicating that with parents gave them the assurance that we are looking into the educational well-being of their children. It was very difficult for them to understand that CAT4 was not an academic assessment, okay? But it's to help us understand the children's learning styles and possibly predict the learning areas they'll go to in the future. But having come back, we were very deliberate to focus on the well-being of the children. So the first 3 weeks, thank God everyone came back. They were ready for the learning with the COVID-19 measures. However, they did not seem to be traumatized in any way. So we're very fortunate with that. But the children, I think, had missed school so much that they, up to when we closed this March, they were looking forward every single day to coming to school. So that was a plus with their emotional well-being and mental health. And then again, now coming back into the regular school system, it was difficult for the children because they want to interact with each other. However, once we got routine going, we are able to now carry on with a normal program, with a normal program, and then deliver our assessments. We focus on assessments for learning and assessments of learning. So I'm very fortunate and I have a wonderful team of teachers who are really excited about just ensuring that we're able to focus on skills and knowledge of the children and prepare them for 21st century skills, what am I trying to say? Prepare them, you know, with the 21st century skills for the world that awaits them.
Great, thank you. And Kipani, have you, did you notice any impact on students because of the pandemic, and did that, I guess, force you to change the way that you're assessing your students in any way?
Definitely. It was a challenge, but it was a challenge that we were prepared for, because we were already using a lot of online platforms before the pandemic set on us. But we still had to tweak the way we assessed the students online. Actually, funny enough, right at the beginning of the pandemic, the attainment wasn't really affected that much. What we noticed was, I think it was probably because everybody thought, okay, this pandemic is only going to be for 3 months. It's going to be for 2 months or 3 months, and we're going to ride the wave and come out of it as soon as possible. But later part, after 6 months, we noticed that students, either whether they were getting tired with screen time as well, with the anxiety was settling in. It really became, we noticed that the attainment was much lower than it was before that. And so we had to find ways of motivating the students. We had to find ways of making sure that our pastoral team is on board, even getting in touch with the students at home, online, which is always not easy. Then we moved to blended learning, which was also another challenge, because now the teacher is having to deal with some students who are physically in school and others who are back at home. And then we realized that those who were coming into school were performing much better than those who were at home. And we started encouraging the students to come into school. So yeah, attainment was really affected. In terms of what we had to do to assess their progress, we actually partnered with Century Tech, which really helped a lot, because it was quite at the same time that the teachers themselves are working from home, and CIS Lagos is in Nigeria, and we sometimes have issues with traffic, we have issues with power and things like that. So we had to deal with a lot of other factors apart from just the pandemic. We had to overcome parents also. So you're thinking, we are already talking about some of the barriers that we had. So we had to actually deal with parents being at home, being anxious about loss of income and all of those things. And all this filtered to the students and how they were performing. But with the blended learning, we also noticed that the teachers needed to be educated on how to deliver blended learning. While they knew how to do online, full online teaching, it was kind of different to do blended learning. So we had to actually get our teachers on board, get their buy-in as well, which was really crucial, because they also had to think about their own children that are going through the same. They have to take care of them as well. So Century Tech came on board, and it really made things a lot easier for us. AI platform that helped to check misconceptions, do some of the marking. The teachers that didn't have to mark, the teachers just needed to tweak what they teach the students based on the feedback from the platform, and this really helped us. And then we adopted a few other learning platforms as well along the way, which helped us. The use of PASS, we tried to do PASS for our students while they were online to check if, them learning from home was going to affect it, or how it impacted their attainment, how they impacted basically their attitudes to school and everything. And we noticed that it had, at the beginning of the year, it didn't really do much, but later on it did have an impact. So, yeah, the pandemic really did have an impact on the attainment of the students, but I'm glad to say that as of now, we have kind of ridden that trough. We are now, rising again on that curve. So it's much better. It's looking good.
Great, that's really, really good to hear. Thank you. Thanks. And Callum, what's your experience been of that?
Well, I think actually we've Kapani starts to talk about a very key point, is that attainment was affected through various different external factors, whether it be internet access to technology, people being able to get to and from the places they need to. And attainment was affected in Egypt and at Malvern College through many of those external factors. We look at how students were already using technology before we went to full online. Students from, let's say, age 10 and up were already having mobile phones that they were using for social media apps, whether it be WhatsApp or TikTok. As much as it grieves me to say that students were using TikTok, they were. And we had to kind of tap into how they're already using technology and adapt it to purpose. That was quite a difficult barrier for us. We had students who would edit videos to go on YouTube, but weren't quite aware as to how to submit a file or attach a file to an email. So it really made us think differently about our teaching methods within that. How our attainment was affected was very similar to across Africa, with maths being quite significantly impacted. And although the GL international reports will show that English wasn't as impacted, English writing was significantly impacted. And one of the things that we found is because the children were not putting that pen to paper, that physical act of writing stories. It's not, there seems to be a disconnect between a creativity and writing this lengthy, detailed, descriptive story on pen and paper versus typing away on a laptop or whatever device they can get their hands on. So we found that writing skills decreased significantly when it came to fictional writing, descriptive writing. Persuasive writing and non-chronological reports seem to maintain somewhere in the middle. And I believe that a lot of this comes down to exposure that the children had. Children being at home more than they are in school, they're sat more in front of a TV, or they have access to a device more. As much as educators, we want to sit there and say, no, our children will be playing in the gardens. More often than not, sorry, I'll rephrase it. There are more children than we think who have access to technology at a young age. And this is more prevalent than much of us would like to agree to. We see children having access to iPads at toddler's age. And so where our maths and writing were significantly impacted more, our reading was maintained due to how we use technology. One of the online systems we used was Active Learn Primary, and they have their Bug Club, which was an online ebooks. Children could answer comprehension questions based on them throughout. By tapping into that during online learning, we managed to maintain a level of reading and be able to arrange one-to-one reading sessions where we sat on Zoom with the children and walk them through this comprehension book. Or what do you think about this? Using a lot of pedagogical methods to tap in and support them where it needed the most. That's much harder to break into compared to maths. And we can go into a bit further on when we talk about barriers. But certainly when you look at the practical teaching elements that you can use in maths, you don't have access to them during online learning. You certainly have access to pictorial, but being able to sit in front of a child and count deans and show groups of individual things, it was a significant barrier. So I believe I'm starting to go around in a circle here. But the message is there that our writing and maths was significantly impacted, and what contributed greater to that attainment were a lot of the external factors, those well-being factors that Lee and Kapani have both mentioned. And that's somewhere that we've been then developing to approach. We've now got literacy champions throughout our secondary school who then integrate literacy throughout their individual subjects, throughout science, in PE, in history, making sure that there's not relevant, just pertinent terminology that's being ingrained into their daily diet, so we can start to pick up on that attainment that's been dropped, particularly over that exchange between year 6 and year 7 that I know Lee mentioned before, where she said as soon as the children got to key stage 3, there was a significant change. And so that's how we try to bolster that within Malvern College.
Great. Thanks for that. And finally, Lee, just your experience, I guess, across a group setting. How has the pandemic impacted that?
Most of what I'm going to say will echo the things that you've already heard from my colleagues. Across the group, we did see a drop in attainment, and like Callum indicated, we initially wondered whether that was due to the external factors, you know, kids having to share resources with siblings. Maybe they didn't have laptops at home, maybe they didn't have access to the Wi-Fi. So as a group, we tried to take those barriers away. We gave every kid the opportunity to buy a laptop, offset it against the fees. We worked with training with the parents, we worked training with the schools, and you know, just like Mr. Kapani has said, our kids were familiar with technologies that they were using. They were familiar with Google Classroom, they were familiar with Zoom and Google Meet. So it wasn't that was causing the drop in attainment. So we started to look again individual children, and we found something really interesting. Kids that have been doing really well on a face-to-face setting with really high levels of attainment, we were seeing their attainment levels in some cases steadily drop. On the other side of the coin, kids that had struggled to focus in the class, maybe hadn't shined, when we were exposing them to remote teaching and learning, their levels of attainment started to rise. So when we all came together to explore this, the one thing that we could conclude was obviously social and emotional aspects of learning were playing a huge role and still do as we navigate through this pandemic. But also it was highlighting how much we need to focus on the individual needs of the children in terms of designing our lessons. I think both Mr. Kapani and Callum touched on this, where they were talking about the visual spatial profiles and how to use those teaching and learning hints that GL gives you to inform your teaching and learning in the classroom. So what we've seen now, because as you know, we're back in second lockdown, so we're all on RTL again. Those kids who were better, if you like, dealing with RTL are still doing really well. When we came back to class, their levels of attainment maintained. Those children who needed that face-to-face were identified as possibly our fragile learners as well. So our pastoral team have worked very much alongside their academic counterparts to make sure that all of the children are effectively supported. So what we're hoping as we do this next round of assessments is that we're going to see the gap in attainment close.
Great, thank you. And actually that brings us nicely onto the sort of next question around individualizing learning for students. Which was obviously very, very important. But I guess it'd be really interesting to find out what role our GL assessment data has played in helping you to individualize teaching and learning and interventions for students. And if we can start off with you, Lee, that'd be great.
Okay, again, we've been on a journey with this sphere. You know, initially we were just looking at any student that had a gap of more than 10 in the verbal, between the verbal, the spatial, the quantitative, or the non-verbal. We were then referring them to the personalized learning department for either additional testing or for additional support. As we got better at using the GL assessments, and better at integrating the GL assessments with our own interim assessments that we carry out half-termly and termly, we were able to fine-tune it and start looking at the individual students' needs, not looking at raw attainment, but looking at progress and helping to use the data to break down the curriculum into, okay, what milestones has that child reached now? What does that mean in terms of the curriculum? What's the next milestone we need to get that child to? How can we help them get there? What are the steps that we need to take in order to move that child from here to here? initially, it was just the teacher doing that journey, doing that discussion, that planning. Now it's the student working with the teacher. Okay, that metacognitive process. Where am I? Where do I need to be? What does the data say about where I am? What does my teacher need to help me do in order to get me to this goal? So I think we've come a long way. We're not saying we're perfect. We're not saying we've got all the answers. One of the things that I'm loving about today is how much I'm learning and can take back and use with the group. But I think we're now at a point where we genuinely are seeing the children as individuals. And as I said earlier, looking at them through these appropriate lenses to get that holistic view of what the child needs academically, but also what the child needs in terms of maintaining their well-being.
Great, thank you. And I think that the point on metacognition is really important. And that's where we want students to be, isn't it? Being able to judge where they are and being able to help themselves to move forward with the support of their teachers. So I think that's a really important point to touch on. Callum, what are your thoughts on that? What role has GL data played in helping you to individualize teaching and learning?
Well, certainly before lockdown really kicked in, we had already managed to collect together everything from our NGRT, CAP4, PTM, PTE from September and the previous July. And it did give us that opening door to start seeing the students that are going to need that help and those spatial biases, the verbal deficits, which students are going to need those early interventions. And so GL definitely gave us that first big step into identifying the cohorts that need those supports. When lockdown came into full effect, I think that was actually a time that probably we would have benefited quite a lot from having PASS, which is the one GL assessment that we don't have at present. We've mentioned this a few times already, how important well-being is and the impact that it's had. And that was the one assessment we didn't have. So that's where we needed to tap in more into the qualitative data, look at those individual needs. And so GL gave us that giant step forward. And from there, we've been able to take it there onto that individual level. The pastoral teams within our year groups. We're not a huge school. We are 3-4 form entry in primary. So it means that our teams can work very closely together. We've got a huge overlap in the students. We know lots about the student in different environments, whether it be from football teams, from their other extracurricular activities, as well as their personal interests. So using that giant step, we then needed to look at exactly what was going on for those students. We talked about their preferred atmosphere. Some of those students that typically were not performing well, suddenly during online learning, showing that steady increase, as Lee was talking from the Braeburn group. By mentioning that, Lee, you did remind me of some students on an anecdotal basis that I discovered were blossoming in the same way. Maybe quieter students who weren't as engaging in the busy classroom atmosphere, suddenly at home had this environment where they could sit in front of a laptop and have their own workspace, and they were not bothered by anyone. Much more, you could categorically say introverted children, but it was more those who felt overwhelmed by the classroom environment, suddenly finding that blossom. So where GL gave us a first giant step, we were then able to tap into those individual needs. I think if we'd used PASS, we've been able to make a greater step forward. And that's something I think we need to investigate as a college going forward, is the benefit of PASS or sensory tech to see how it can benefit in those avenues. There's no doubt that we would have struggled to identify those groups with the minimal face-to-face interaction of home learning. We'd have to sit there on a daily basis with every child one-to-one going, how are you? And that's something that takes a long amount of time through a computer, something we can reduce that time span by being in person. So I think, yeah, that's where GL brought us, and that's where we were able to go thanks to GL.
Thank you, thanks. And Giovanni, just a similar, same question to you.
Yes, so thank you, Via. Pretty much similar to what Kalam and Leah have said. One of the things we do, though, is that we do also have our internal assessments, apart from GL assessment. And when our students come in to senior school, they actually do their Cat 4, and then we have an indicator of what they may get at the end of Key Stage 3 and at IGCSE level. What we then do is extrapolate what they what level they should be working at the end of each year towards the end of Key Stage 3. So when we do the PTMs and PTEs, we look to see if those students are on track. But what the Cat 4 does is it helps us to identify which students we need to create different pathways for. And that has really helped us in terms of stretching some students, just really making sure that the individualized pathways are very effective. And I'm happy to say, through this, we actually have had students doing early entry IGCSEs because they have actually skipped certain levels because they're just maybe way ahead. And also, what it also did, it helped us to identify those students that need additional support. So we have our department for additional learning and enrichment services, then they can actually put in place appropriate intervention strategies for those students. This also helps with the teachers, because one of the things that we try to do is to make sure that the teachers are not saddled with too much work. While we do a lot of CPDs, we help them understand what differentiation should be like, what individualized lessons should be like. It's also really important to make sure that the workload of the teachers is lightened, because if the workload is lighter, they are much more able to facilitate the learning of the students more effectively. And so it's really been helpful in that sense. But the most important thing is that we haven't been using just one. What we have tried to do was to make sure that, I think Leah touched on it earlier on when she talked about the differences in the biases. What we also do is we look at how much value added do we want to add to each student from when they come in to when they finish Key Stage 3 or when they finish IGCSE, and we continuously check the value added, the value we are adding each year, and the progress tests. That's why they are so important for us, because in terms of reading, as we said earlier, reading literacy is really crucial in terms of making sure that they understand what goes on in every subject area. So if we notice that through the reading test, if we notice that any student is underachieving or is not doing as well as they expected, then something is going on, and then we immediately look to see how we can address it.
Great, thank you, thanks. And Doris, just in the interest of time, I guess if you could combine the a question around the Kenyan National Curriculum and the new Kenyan National Curriculum, and how Cat 4 will potentially help you to prepare students for that, for how that's moving.
Okay, I didn't get the second part. I heard the Kenya National Curriculum and the...
and how Cat 4 can support you to support students in being able to access the new national curriculum.
Okay, great. So the thing is, at Amana School, because our teachers have had experience in schools that offer the British National Curriculum, we already understand where the CBC curriculum wants to go. So as it's being rolled out, we can see the vision at the end. We know the road to take. Therefore, we're able to use the feedback from Cat 4, for instance, to support what you already know, and then go on to the next step there. So I said, we'd love to do the progress tests and any other assessments. That's something we're going to explore as you go on, because we have the national assessments which we have done, and we're very confident that we can meet and indeed exceed the expectations. However, to fully to fully take advantage of the resources that are out there. We're not limiting ourselves to the resources that have been provided by the government of Kenya for CBC curriculum. One, that is also being rolled out. So that's a fact. The new curriculum is rolling out new material. So we are not wanting to reinvent the wheel. We'll use the resources that have been tried and tested that are out there. We're looking to do the progress tests and also help the children understand that they are at par with their peers. If they can think about thinking, if they can be actively engaged in the learning process and learning to be reflective as well. Those are things that we are attempting to put in every day. I wouldn't say in every lesson, but at the end of the day, the children have had time to evaluate their learning. They've had time to talk about what it is they know, what kind of knowledge they have built. They're able to think about what new information they're going to share. And some now, remember, these are children aged 6 to 8. So these are children who are just enjoying school. Everything about school is so fantastic. But as we get them to think about their learning, they are taking that responsibility. I'm happy to note that we have 2 children who are possibly gifted and talented, and therefore we need to have adequate ways of assessing them to make sure that we provide the learning that will keep them engaged so that they can reach their maximum potential. We are, yes, Vir?
No, carry on. Sorry.
Okay, so as we roll out CBC, our children, CBC is now at grade 4. At Amana School, our children are up to grade 3. So end of primary, it'll be up to grade 6. Our thinking is that as we prepare these children to exceed in the national curriculum of Kenya, they should be able to, if they needed to move on to the international schools locally or abroad, they should then be able to hold their own in terms of learning.
Great, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have to end there. I have many more questions I'd love to speak to all of you about, but unfortunately that's our time up. So thank you very, very much for joining us today for the panel. And I'll hand back over to Rachel now to introduce the next session.
Thanks, Vera, and thank you to all our panelists for a really interesting and insightful session there. I think what it really showed to me was, as educators, how much you've been learning and adapting yourselves over the last year. It was really great to hear how you've used solutions from both Century and GL to support you during these times. And I think a couple of things that really came through from that session was about the importance of the individual needs of students and well-being as well, clearly being high on the agenda for everyone. And so we come to our final session of the day, and I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Adam England, Principal at CIS Lagos. Adam has been a head teacher now for 17 years, and one of the things he's currently working on is looking at developing transformational educational spaces to improve not only learner well-being, but I think something that Kipani also touched on in the last session, but also teacher well-being as well. So Dr. Adam, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to all the colleagues who've joined us. And of course, a huge thank you to those who've contributed. And you can see probably in Mr. Bila and Mrs. Dossimo, our earlier panelists, the key reasons CIS is so successful. It empowers its staff to do the kinds of things that they do. And I think trying to follow on from what has been said is going to be incredibly difficult. I was really hoping Doris would carry on speaking for a lot longer, so I wouldn't have to say very much at all. But following on from the quality of what has been said, it is tricky, but I'll do my best to sum up. I'll do a short intro. I'll briefly touch on how Century and GL have impacted upon us here at CIS. And then I'll sum up by saying what I think is the future of African education. But first of all, let's make this point. Get the future of Africa right and get the future of the world right. So much of the world's culture comes from Africa and is based on Africa. And that's why we have to get the future of African education right. And I'll ask another question at this stage. What does the end of the world look like? Does it look like a nuclear holocaust? Does it look like a viral related holocaust? No, the answer to that, and it's not COVID, the answer to what does the end of the world look like? It looks like bad education. It's as simple as that. If you don't teach children to self-regulate, if you don't teach them to innovate, if you don't teach them to build their skills, if you don't teach them to reflect and do the metacognitive stuff, then it's unlikely that the world has a future at all. So that's the future of the world. It's in our hands, and it depends on the quality of the education we offer our children. And in many ways, it's summed up by the phrase, the banality of evil. For evil to take place, all that has to happen is for the good people to stand by and do nothing. And it's the same with bad education. For bad education to occur, all that has to happen is for the good educators, the good people, to stand by and let it happen. And we're not doing that in Africa. You will have seen today the quality of thought, the quality of context, the intensity of application. And Lee and the others made so many very, very valid points. And the one that I'm keen to extrapolate, and this will bring me on to Century and GL, is the value of data. Imagine trying to run a school if you didn't know all the things that Lee and Mr. Beeler and Mrs. Dossimo and I think Callum referenced, if you didn't know who was doing what and how well and to whom, and if you didn't know how whom was feeling, how could you possibly make good strategic decisions about the governance and the direction that that school takes? So that's the first point with GL. If you look at PASS, if you look at CATS4, these are your compasses in many ways that will tell you who is doing well, and amongst your staff, who is doing what, how well, and to whom. And Mr. Beeler touched on one really, really important point, and that is the amount of data that you can use to personalize learning. Now, it is my firm belief that the future of education relies heavily on personalization of learning. And there are a couple of phrases for it. The one I like is heutagogy. And heutagogy is all about self-determining and self-directed learning. And of course, if you want to have some say in how you learn as a youngster or a teenager, you absolutely have to have guidance from school to point you along the right path. And the only way that guidance can come is if the school has data about how you learn, how well you learn, and can scaffold that way forward for you, allowing you to make key decisions and key self-determined and self-related decisions on how you want to learn, where you want to learn it, and to what intensity you wish to learn it to. So that's the first point. You cannot operate in a void with the data. You will be guessing. And the one thing that GL does is it takes the guesswork out of governance. You can make really strong strategic decisions as a leader or a manager or an administrator of school, and you know full well that by and large they will be as empirical as they can be. And it's that empirical, objective nature of the collection of that data that allows you to take strong strategic steps forward. And as I said, if you invert that thought, try doing it without that data and see how hard it is, and you would be in a mess straight away. So the second point, and let's kick on to Century, and Ms. Dossimo touched on this. Century was the right tool at the right time. You cannot just load stuff onto an online platform and think children will work their way through it. It is complete nonsense. And sadly, that is by and large what many UK schools have sought to do. Their online provision, and I'm really glad we don't do this in Africa, has been, I'll put stuff online and children will do it, which is rubbish. And what Century has allowed us to do, it's allowed us to put our foot on the accelerator. So if GL and the data gives the strategic direction you want to take, then Century and that AI type learning platform accelerates the movement in that direction. So what it allowed us to do was to quickly shift school online, still deliver our traditional curriculum, but progress our progress through that curriculum. So in between the traditional waypoints or stepping stones, Century was there producing those chunks and those micro chunks of work that children could work through by themselves. If the work was too hard, it made it easier. If it was too easy, it made it harder. It fed back to the teacher. And as the saying goes, what was there not to like? Especially when it came down to identifying where children's misconceptions are, because then it also becomes a management tool, because you can speak to your staff where perhaps in certain subject areas or certain year groups, certain numbers of misconceptions are accruing and they're reaching a particular ceiling. That probably tells you something about the way the pedagogy is connecting or not connecting with the learning. So that's what Century did for us. It allowed us to accelerate in the strategic direction that GL allowed us to identify in the first place. And if you want to understand the importance or the relevance of those two key points on the compass, Think about trying to work through the pandemic without them. Think about trying to work in a void of data, so you're guessing with your strategy, and then think about trying to work online without additional supportive, differentiated work targeting or personalizing children's learning. And straight away it becomes a mess. And if you want to see the type of mess it culminates in, you can look at where many schools are, sadly in the maintained sector, in some cases in the UK, and the progress of children, the regression of well-being, the regression of literacy, the regression of learning have taken place because they have not worked in that data-rich environment, and they haven't had an X factor which has allowed them to accelerate in the directions they wish to move in. I want to pick up on a point that Lee made as well, and that is that, that the data can be collected, but unless you have the wisdom to use it, to act on it, to deploy it constructively, then it is just data. And that's where your wisdom comes in. And by connecting it with your senior leadership team, the experience of your staff, the feedback from your teachers, you can begin to build an extra sort of meta strategic strategy that allows you to capitalize on the initial strategy. And that meta strategic strategy is what Mr. Beeler alluded to. It's that personalization of learning. Take a close look at the data. Differentiate for your classes. If you have preferred learning styles or biases in those classes, then one surefire way to make sure that people learn exponentially is to craft or create a pedagogy, or as we said earlier on, a heutagogy that allows them to move quickly because it suits their learning style. And if you think it's nonsense, you can take a look at the standards at CIS. When I fed back to our board just before Christmas, they said, well, you wouldn't know COVID has been here. And you wouldn't, because most of our standards were pretty much where I'd anticipated they would be in terms of their value added. And that is, of course, another facet of GL's provision that gives you, I think, probably the best progress measure you're ever likely to work with. I am not that interested, in all honesty, at the schools who say we have 80% A stars or 85% level 9s, because if 100% of those children were supposed to get A stars or level 9s, that school is technically underachieved. And what GL gives you with that value added is the capacity to create a trajectory of progress from year 7 through to year 11 and year 13, and prior to that, using the other scores, another set of related progress measures. So you can look at any time at an extrapolated trajectory, which allows you to look at where any child should be compared with where they are. And on the back of that, of course, you can generate the appropriate intervention measures. But as I said earlier, imagine trying to function without that data, without the ability to use it, and without the ability to accelerate away in the direction you want to go in. And you would find that you are working in a void or a vacuum, and in effect, your school would be going backwards. So therefore, what does the future look like? Well, we've kind of pretty much talked about it there. It's going to be, for me, a mixture of the traditional and the progressive. There is always going to be scope for good pedagogy, sound preparation of lessons, great teachers who engage with any curriculum and can make even a fairly standard curriculum highly entertaining and relevant. Therefore, what is the X factor in addition to the amount of data you can get from somebody like GL and the amount of self-direction or personalization that Century will give you? And I feel it's that heutagogy or that personalization or that self-direction. We are in direct competition with really appealing online spaces. Children like to work in them. There's no doubt that many of those online spaces are going to be a big draw for children. So when children are back in school en masse across the globe, and especially in Africa, for school to be relevant and school to be meaningful, some transformation of the learning space is going to have to take place. And we've got a couple of these wonderful self-directed learning areas here at CIS, where children can, by and large, to a certain percentage of a topic, execute the completion of that topic in a way and in a style that suits their learning. And of course, it's that personalization, that heutagogy, that carefully crafted scaffolding that allows a child to take ownership of the way that person learns and the targets they're moving towards, that builds that engagement and builds that movement towards the future. So to sum it up there, because I know I'm nearly out of my quarter of an hour, The future is definitely going to be one where we compete with those online spaces, and to make our own spaces at school meaningful and engaging, that's what we've got to do. We've got to make that transition from where we've been, the sage on the stage, where by and large the teacher was the main resource in the class, to the guide on the side, where the teacher crafts a bundle of resources and allows children to progress through them in a particular way that suits their learning style. But of course, where would we be without our allies, our EdTech allies in this section? Where would we be if we didn't have the data? If ever you've worked in the military, you would see how thoroughly all data is gathered to make good decisions for good strategic operations. Where would we be without it? The answer is we'd be going backwards. And where would we be without a really good EdTech provision that connects or correlates or tessellates with our young people's mindsets, because they love tech, to drive and accelerate you forward in the direction you want to go. So that's me in a nutshell. It's been a complete pleasure listening to everybody speak. I am absolutely delighted to be in such a rich and culturally sound working environment where my colleagues understand that to move forward, we have got to engage in the activities we have talked about today. And thank you everybody for your contribution. And above all else, thank you very much Century and GL for supporting us in the attainments and the directions we wish to go in and to make. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Adam. What a really great way to finish off our event today. I think at the start then, I wonder what you were talking about when we were looking at the end of the world, but I certainly feel completely reassured that actually the future of the world is safe, because all I've heard today from all of our speakers is from great educationalists about great education and real clear determination to continue to improve and enhance the life of learners everywhere. The time has certainly flown this morning, and so now it's down to me to bring today's session to a close. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of our speakers from today and all of the staff at CIS Lagos, Century and GL who've worked together to make this event possible. I'm sure you'll agree it's been a really great opportunity to connect with peers everywhere, and I'm sure that children and learners from Africa and beyond will be benefiting from our shared insights and knowledge. Most of all, thank you to all of you who have joined us today and taken time out of your busy schedules to attend all of our sessions. We'll be following up with certificates of attendance, and recordings will also be available. But if you've got any questions or want to speak to anyone at Century or GL, you'll find all of our contact details on the screen at the moment. And as most of us have mentioned, we're as well available to connect on Twitter, LinkedIn as well. So thank you all, thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll look forward to meeting and speaking again soon in the future. Thank you.